Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Friday, the 14th of June. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
Nigel speaks. At the Reform Party's first press conference since one poll found that fated crossover point, with the Tories now ducking into third place, 1 point behind Nigel Farage's party. What on earth is next in store?
And Labour tax attack. The Tories come out all guns blazing on what they describe as Labour's 18 tax rises, from parents' tax to pensions tax to family home tax. But what is the truth? We'll speak to both sides.
And it's kickoff for the Euros 2024. Scotland will play Germany in a tense opening game. We'll be soaking up the atmosphere in both Scotland and Germany.
Right, well, views, get them in. What does this poll show, Tom? OK, so Reform are now the second party in terms of vote share in one poll. What else?
Well, I think one of the things is that there have been a number of polls now where Reform and the Tories are sort of within 3 points of each other. Now, 3 points generally in a poll that surveys 2,000 people representatively, which is the industry standard, about 3 points is the margin of error. So it could be that for the last week, Reform has been ahead of the Tories. It could be that they haven't crossed over yet. This is all within the margin of error. This is all neck and neck stuff. But it does show something symbolic. And that is what Nigel Farage will no doubt be trying to capitalise upon at his press conference in less than an hour's time. Yes,
because I was wondering, what does Rishi Sunak do here? He's leading his party to poll now below the Reform Party, a party that is only 3 years old, only been around for 5 minutes. What does he do? Does he try to relaunch his campaign in one way or another? Last time we saw him, he did look a little weary. He did look like perhaps he had almost given up. Conservatives coming out with things that suggest that perhaps they're resigned to defeat. Does anything change in this election campaign from the perspective of the Conservatives, Labour? Because Reform could be taking votes from Labour as well.
Well, the big choice
in some seats.
Big choice for the Conservatives. They've had a big attack on Labour today, a big press conference about Labour's tax rises and all the rest of it. Do they pivot at some point to stop attacking Labour and start attacking Reform? Or could that be counterproductive? Some big decisions for the head honchos of the Conservative campaign. Yes,
let us know what you think. gbnews.com/your say. Please do get in touch, but let's get the headlines.
Good afternoon from the GB newsroom at 12:02. Your top story this hour. The Prime Minister says a vote for Reform UK risks handing a blank cheque to the Labour Party. The new poll by YouGov puts Nigel Farage's party neck and neck with the Tories less than 3 weeks before the election. The pollster says the close result represents a seismic shift in the voting landscape. But they also caution that Britain's voting system means Reform may still struggle to pick up any seats. Meanwhile, Labour scored 37%, down 1 point, while the Liberal Democrats also lost a point, scoring 14%, with the Greens on 7 points. Responding to the latest poll, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Laura Trott, said a vote for Reform risks putting Labour in charge, which would mean higher taxes.
We know, on their own figures, that their manifesto would take the tax burden to a record high. But the truth is much worse. On top of that, we know the £38.5 billion black hole in Labour's unfunded promises mean taxes will go up by an extra £2,094 for every working family in our country. So, we know the size of the bill, but not how they plan to pay for it.
Meanwhile, specialist mental health hubs will be set up under a plan by Labour to help people get back to work. It would see an extra 8,500 new staff recruited to boost access to mental health support. Depression and anxiety are among the most common conditions that force people out of work, while an estimated 1.2 million people are currently waiting for mental health treatment. Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting told GB News that poor healthcare is costing the country billions.
I'm the health secretary and I'm able to deliver those 40,000 extra appointments every week and double the number of diagnostic scanners and 8,500 extra mental health staff to cut the more than 1 million people waiting for mental health treatment. Not only are we going to be able to get people back to health, in lots of those cases, that means people back to work. So we've currently got 3 million people who are both off sick and off work in our country. Not their fault, they can't get the treatment, but if we get people off waiting lists, not only will we be getting them back to health, we'll also be getting them back to work. That will help drive economic growth.
And backing British farmers will be essential to the plan set to be unveiled by the Liberal Democrats later. The party's deputy leader, Daisy Cooper, will be on the campaign trail in the east of England, promoting her party's national food strategy. It would include financial help for farmers who are coping with expensive energy and production costs. The party says the strategy also tackles rising prices on supermarket shelves, ending food poverty and ensuring better food security. In other news, the US and Ukrainian presidents have signed a 10-year security agreement, bolstering Kyiv's defence and inching it closer towards NATO membership. The historic deal was signed on the sidelines of the G7 summit, which is currently taking place in southern Italy. It aims to guarantee support for Ukraine's war against Russia's invasion, even if Donald Trump were to win November's US election. The gathering also agreed to continue a loan worth £40 billion funded by frozen Russian assets. Campaigners from several movements, including the Grenfell fire and the infected blood scandal, are calling for new rules to ensure recommendations from public inquiries can't be ignored. A walk is taking place in West London later to commemorate the 7th anniversary of the Grenfell Tower disaster that claimed 72 lives. The first phase of a public inquiry ended 5 years ago, but campaigners say some of its recommendations still haven't been implemented. The groups are calling for a new body that would follow up on findings and ensure they're put into place. Tesco has revealed a strong increase in the amount of groceries bought in the last 3 months as inflation eases. The UK's largest supermarket firm revealed total retail sales grew 3.4% in May compared with the same time last year. This came on the back of a 5% increase in food sales, with high demand for fresh produce helping to drive higher sales volumes. And as Britain waits for grey skies to clear, Greece is sweltering through its earliest ever heatwave. Tourist sites have been forced to close and elderly people are taking refuge at special cooling centres as temperatures in some areas push past 43 degrees. The deputy mayor in Athens says emergency services are keeping watch for anyone experiencing difficulty. Experts say Greece has been severely impacted by climate change in recent years, with rising temperatures fueling deadly fires and erratic weather conditions. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 12. Now, Nigel Farage insists his party is now the official opposition after Reform have overtaken the Conservatives in one poll for the first time.
Yes, in a YouGov poll for The Times this was, Reform went 1 point ahead of the Conservatives, with Labour experiencing a slight fall in support, dropping down to 37%.
Well, this made for an interesting opening bout to last night's election debate over on ITV, where 7 parties competed to win your vote.
Oh, it's difficult when there are 7 representatives, isn't it? Labour's deputy leader, Angela Rayner, was asked if she would rejoin the European Union. This is what she said.
If elected, would you ever rejoin the EU or the single market? Angela Rayner.
No, and your other question before was Brexit, and as a result of the referendum, that's what we respect.
You would never rejoin the EU or the single market?
No.
Well, the Liberal Democrats, for their part, have put fixing the NHS and social care at the heart of their manifesto.
Our manifesto is a manifesto to save the NHS and social care. We're pledging £9 billion to invest upstream. We see on the TV all these disastrous pictures of people dying in the back of ambulances, suffering the indignity of corridor care because they can't see a GP, they can't see a dentist, and that's what we want to fix.
Daisy Cooper there, and the SNP's Stephen Flynn criticised Labour's response to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
It took 4.5 months and the death or injury of almost 100,000 civilians in Gaza for the Labour Party to back a ceasefire. On day one of a Labour government, will you end arms sales to Israel?
But if we were in government, we would immediately review, as we've been asking the Conservatives, the legal advice on arms sales to Israel, and we will comply with international law.
Thank you.
The SNP's question there, but also invited, bizarrely, were Plaid Cymru. Well, they made a return and their leader wasn't impressed with the main party's ambitions.
Election, you'll hear me talking a lot about ambition. Where is the ambition from either of the Westminster main parties to invest in allowing us in Wales to make the most of our natural resources through devolving the Crown Estate, allowing us to invest in transport and connectivity through giving us the billions we're owed as a result of HS2 rail in England? That's the ambition that we need. We're not hearing it from the Conservatives, and I regret we're not hearing it from
Nigel.
There we go. And the Greens, Carla Denyer, says immigration isn't the problem. It's government failure to invest that causes issues.
I think it's shameful when some politicians scapegoat the people who become our neighbours, our friends, our colleagues, to distract from their chronic underinvestment in public services. The solution isn't scapegoating or pulling up the drawbridge. The solution is investing in our communities to make sure everyone has access to the services they need.
More spending, more migration. Interesting. Well, after a surge in the polls, Reform UK's Nigel Farage took the Tories to task over their immigration promises.
Given that your 2010 manifesto, your 2015 manifesto, your 2017 manifesto said you'd reduce net migration to tens of thousands, your 2019 manifesto said immigration would massively reduce, and that net 4.3 million people have come into the country since that time, why on earth should anybody believe the fifth manifesto that promises cuts to net migration?
Because of the record of this Prime Minister. So we've had...
that's fine, I'm happy.
Figures out today.
Oh, it's interesting that everyone laughed at that one, because it is actually the case that Rishi Sunak is cutting visas. It's just come a little too late for the official statistics.
It's because all of the stats obviously come out the year after the thing that's happened.
Yeah.
So the migration falls that we're seeing now, actually the numbers will come out. Well, we've got preliminary visa numbers, but the annual net migration numbers won't come out until next year.
Yeah.
Likely Keir Starmer will be able to say, look, I've halved migration. And it'll actually be all the things that Rishi Sunak's done.
Yes, and everyone will obviously point to the 750,000 net migration from last year, or close to. Anyway, joining us now is our political editor, Christopher Hope. Christopher, hard to know where to start. The Prime Minister's camp today, very difficult to see the Reform Party, only 3 years old, now beating them in the polls. Yes, one poll, but still an important poll.
Yeah, a moment, isn't it? I'm back in Westminster now. I was in Salford last night in the so-called spin room for that seven-way debate on ITV. I was struck by the fact that Labour just stopped doing WhatsApp messages to journalists trying to spin the answers from Angela Rayner, whereas the Tories kept going with their attempt to spin what Penny Mordaunt was saying. Whether that becomes a trend that the Labour Party is almost assuming it's going to win, that could be a worry for them if that carries on. I don't know why they weren't doing their bit on the spinning side. But yeah, no question that the spin room, the debate yesterday was dominated by that YouGov poll in the Times. Labour 37 points, Reform 19 points, Tory Party 18 points. I spoke to David Bull afterwards. He's the co-deputy leader of Reform UK. And I got him to say, I pushed him on this, what's a good result for Reform UK? He said 4 MPs. Now, I put it to you both. If Reform get 4 MPs, and if they're second in the share of the votes come election day, and the Tory party get maybe 80 to 90 MPs, what does that say about our political system? I mean, it's a real challenge there for Nigel Farage. What will he say about that? Will he question the results, say it's not fair? I think this one is going to bubble and bubble right up to election day. But as of today in Westminster, we've been hearing from the Tory party. Laura Trott's been, she's the Chief Secretary of Treasury, announcing Labour's 18 tax increases. Yes, indeed. Well, maybe. But Labour's, sorry, Tom, Labour's tax increases are here. The Tories say there are 18 different tax measures which the Labour Party don't want to talk about and were not mentioned in their manifesto. But I asked her a question, well, two questions. One about the football, Tom, just for you, and one about tax. Here's what she had to say.
Two. Chris, you're only allowed one.
Why aren't Labour allowing themselves some space for their own uncertain events, like you said just then, that they have to have some way of raising money if they have to, if a black swan event happens like Ukraine, energy shock or COVID? And just quickly, the Euros start this weekend. If you're a football team, you're 4-0 down, the crowd are booing you. Isn't it time to do a deal with a striker on a rival team and get Nigel Farage to do a deal with the Tory party and see off Labour?
Just on football, I'm afraid I'm not the right person to ask, but no. No, what they're doing is they are pretending in a disingenuous way that they've got to wait to see the books. The books are there, right? They're called OBR forecasts, they can look at them, right? What they are doing is secretly planning a number of tax rises which they have not got a mandate for. And that is outrageous, and we are not going to let them get away with it.
So Laura Trott there with her message. She said at one point there, if you think Labour are going to win, start saving, because they clearly think that there are opportunities here to raise taxes from us all if they win power. Many think they might try and lift CGT, capital gains tax, to 40% and equalise income and wealth taxation. My point to them, though, was the Tory party also raised taxes a lot in the last 5 years because of those big black swan events, as we call them, the war in Ukraine, the energy shock coming from that, and the COVID-19 pandemic. So aren't Labour allowed to leave themselves open some room for some increases? But she wasn't having any of it.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating that the Tory party, to some extent, I suppose this could be a core vote retention strategy, talking about the particulars of capital gains tax. It's not the most populist thing to do. What it might be, Chris, my contention, is the Tories know they've lost, and they're already preparing for opposition. They're getting out all of their lines now so that when Labour get in, and they do raise these taxes, they do raise capital gains tax, they do some council tax banding reassessment, tax stocks and shares and wealth more, the Tories will be able to say, we told you so, the government are lying.
Well, that's right. And in fact, Laura Trott used history to make that point. She pointed out that in 1997, when Labour fought that election, they promised no tax increases or no tax raise, certainly on pensions. And within months, Gordon Brown had ramped up taxes on pensions, and that was seen as a major betrayal. So the Tories are building this idea of a future betrayal by a Labour government, going back to what Gordon Brown did when he was Chancellor.
And do you think the attacks on reform are going to get more vicious? We've seen a number of candidates in the press that people have found sort of fruity things that they've tweeted or Facebook posts that they've liked. Do you think there's going to be more of this?
I think so, and I'm expecting Reform UK's manifesto to be announced on Monday, somewhere out of London, somewhere where it might be hard for Westminster journalists to get to try and make the point that this is about voters way outside the Westminster bubble for Nigel Farage. I think he's going to have a lot of scrutiny. He announced things last night in that debate, which I think surprised some Reform UK people. He said there should be a semi or partly elected House of Lords. He talked about lots of referendums, almost like a Swiss model of referenda on all sorts of issues. I mean, whether these things appear in the manifesto on Monday, or whether in fact it's even written yet. We have a draft contract with the British people on their website, but no formal manifesto. So that should be Monday. And at that point, I think they will feel the white heat of proper scrutiny in the next 3 weeks, and rightly so.
No, really interesting stuff, Chris. Well, we'll wait for that on Monday. But also, I hear you're going to be scarpering off to an event in about 40 minutes' time with Nigel Farage. We'll see you then, and let's see if we can you can sort of pin him down on some of these questions. Thanks for joining us.
Well, joining us now is the chief political commentator for The Independent, John Rentoul. John, thank you very much indeed. Your reaction to this poll that came out last night?
Well, I mean, obviously, I have to say it's just one poll and it's within the margin of error. But psychologically, it's absolutely huge. There's no question that it will reinforce existing trends, which are reform going up and the Conservatives and Conservative morale going down. And I think we will see several more polls like this in the coming days and weeks.
And I suppose, John, we might see more polls like this, but we might also see polls in the other direction. This is going to be a bit of a PR battle, because ultimately all of these things are sort of within the margin of error.
Well, no, they're not. I mean, the point is that reform is going up. I mean, reform support is rising, which means that pollsters who tend to give reform a high score and the Tories a lower score, such as YouGov, Redfield and Wilton, and People Polling, who do polling for GBNews, those three pollsters are likely to show the Conservatives being pushed into third place, either consistently or occasionally. But it reflects something that is really happening, which is that reform is advancing and the Tories are retreating.
Now, John, very interesting. Nigel Farage or the Reform Party are managing to spike the interest of the Gen Zers. So the Tories, for 18 to 24-year-olds, they're on about 7%. It's double that for Reform, 15% in the latest polling. That's very interesting, isn't it?
It is. I mean, the whole point is that something is happening in the election campaign. I mean, until Nigel Farage announced that he was coming back as leader and he was going to stand, the polls were static. The Labour lead was fixed at about 20 points. And it didn't seem as if anything, it seemed as if it was going to be one of those boring election campaigns where nothing really changes. Whereas we've suddenly been thrown into an election campaign where there's a story here, and that will interest people. I mean, Nigel Farage was the most interesting person in this TV debate last night. I mean, even if you don't agree with a word he said, he says it in an extremely accessible way. And he's freed from the constraints of a normal political party because he doesn't have to make his sums add up. I mean, you can say that about the Lib Dems and the Greens as well, of course. But I mean, in his case, he uses that liberty to the full.
Yes, I suppose when you are a party that, as one of the deputy leaders said last night, are hoping to win as many as 4 seats. I mean, that's a good night for Reform. It's not like they're going to be forming the next government. And how does that actually work then, John? If you have the Reform Party and the Tory Party on about the same share of the vote, maybe it's a sort of 1983 situation where you had the SDP and the Labour Party almost neck and neck in popular vote share, but one obviously had far many more MPs than the other. How did that all play out?
Well, I mean, the SDP it folded in the end and merged with the Lib Dems. I mean, that's the point. I mean, unless Reform gets right up to some very high scores, it has to get sort of 30% share of the vote, which I mean. Unexpected things happen in politics, but I mean that really would be extraordinary. I mean, if it gets up to that sort of level, then it will start to gain seats. But until then, it's not going to win more than a handful. I mean, three or four is the maximum, as you said, and the voting system is going to deliver to the Conservatives almost however badly they do, 50 to 100 seats. So the idea that something's going to happen like Canada, where the Conservative Party there went down from having a parliamentary majority to 2 seats and was overtaken by a party called Reform, which got 52 seats. That's not going to happen in the UK.
Yes, and Nigel Farage does refer to that example quite a lot. Thank you, John. John Rentoul, Chief Political Commentator for The Independent. I want to get your thoughts on that broadcast from Reform last night. I think it was on Channel 4, 4.5 minutes of just a screen saying Britain is broken, Britain needs reform, or something to that effect, just for 4 minutes, complete silence. Yeah. Utterly bizarre.
A lot of people thought
Effective,
their TVs
maybe?
had broken, but I wonder if that will have only worked for people who are politically engaged. Reform, as you were saying, new party. I would wager many more people know who Nigel Farage is than know the name of his party.
Yes, I imagine so.
And so just seeing the words Britain needs reform up there, I think your average, perhaps low-information voter
No information.
Technical term, might not realise that that's a sort of advert for a party, or might think it's a pro-Labour advert. I mean, who knows?
I love that low information voter. You're basically saying a bit dim.
No, I'm not. They could be very, very smart.
Uninterested.
Just don't like politics. That's most voters.
Yeah,
most voters don't like politics.
Most people aren't political anoraks like you, my sir. Anyway, during this election period, we want to hear from you. We'll be crossing very shortly to our latest People's Panel, hearing from voters in Retford in Nottinghamshire. This is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Today, we've got a veteran who endeavours to help those suffering from anxiety in all its various forms and manifestations.
Yes, over 3 decades, Simon Lee has established himself as a pioneer, seeking new ways to coach personal development and mental strength.
Oh, look, there's this famous phrase, isn't it, that hard times create weak men and weak men create hard times. Is that the kind of philosophy that your work is based on?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because as a child, I received a masterclass in how weak men create hard times.
Did you go through hard times as a kid?
We had 3 toxic men in the family, and they caused the family no end of grief, trauma and hardship. So, and at the time when you're going through it, you think, well, you can't help but fall into a victim mentality. You think, why me? Why am I going through this? But actually, I couldn't do what I do now without that masterclass.
Do you mind me asking who those men were?
Yep, it's fine. One of them was my stepfather.
Yeah.
One of them was my grandfather, and one of them was my uncle.
Right.
So they're all inner family members. And without exception, all of them, outside of the family doors, wanted to put themselves across as moral pillars of society.
How do you turn that story around and be the man that you are today and turn what you went through into a positive? How do you do that?
You've established that pretty much you can, choose to be a victim of your circumstance or use it as inspiration to do better and say, you know what, when I'm older, for example, if you had a bad childhood, I want to make sure my kids get the kind of childhood I didn't have. So how do you relay that to the people you mentor now, I guess?
What we do, I set up something called Unlimited Courage. We talk about giving men a primary aim of courage. So we bring in philosophies such as Stoicism, our own 7 Courages, Bushido, and they love it. They love it. And I must admit, when I found it, I felt like I'd found the Holy Grail.
Wow.
The People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
This Saturday, GB News invites you to witness the pageantry, the tradition and the unity. Join Ellie Costello and me, Andrew Pearce, in a celebration of His Majesty the King's official birthday. Trooping the Colour, Saturday at 10 a.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Remember, as always, we want to hear from you during this election period.
So let's cross over to GB News reporter Will Hollis, who's with a People's Panel in Retford. Will, take it away.
Good afternoon. Yes, we're in Retford in Bassetlaw. Well, it is one brick in the red wall that Labour hopes to rebuild in this upcoming election. Back in 2019, it had the biggest swing from the Labour Party to the Conservatives, a majority of 14,000 votes. So what happens here and what voters are thinking really does matter for the shape of Britain to come. We've got a fantastic People's Panel here. We've got Joyce Crabtree, who's considering voting Conservative. We've got Jeff Hampson as well, and he's going to probably go for the Labour Party. And over here in the corner as well, we've got Peter Pimperton. And Peter, you're interesting because you're considering voting for the Reform Party. What is it about Reform that is attractive to you here in Retford?
I just think we're basically, the country itself is in such a state that we need a change. And I know the Labour Party are using change as their motto, if you like, for future events. But I think we need a bigger change than that, and I think reform probably offer that to us. I've seen, Nigel Farage, not one of my favourite people, I've got to admit, but when I've seen other reform people talking, they seem to be talking common sense and talking about, the mismanagement of funds in this country by the previous Conservative Party. Prior to that was the Labour Party. So I think we just need people to, or we need somebody in charge of the money who puts it in the right place.
And the Reform Party have taken over the Conservatives. They say that they're now the official opposition party for Labour. Jeff, you're one of the people that didn't turn to the Tories in 2019. You're a loyal Labour voter here in the Red Wall. What are you seeing that you're liking, and what are you seeing that maybe you want a little bit more from the Labour Party?
I want more help for people suffering mental health issues, in particular PTSD, which is awful.
Yeah. You're a veteran, so you work with lots of people and a support worker for veterans as well. How important is that is something that happens in the new Labour Party?
Sorry, what was that?
That there's more support for veterans and people like you?
There is. In Bassetlaw, there's a lot of support for veterans, and mainly the Labour councillors have always supported us, supported me anyway, because they know that I support them. Let's just go over to Joyce Crabtree. Joyce, you're considering sticking with the Conservatives. What is it about this Conservative Party that makes you want to continue to vote for the Conservatives?
It's partly because I don't want to vote for Labour, and I don't know anything about the Reform candidate. John Mann really let down a friend of ours over a building issue, and that's why I voted Conservative in the last election.
That's a former MP for Bassetlaw.
Yes.
What are the issues that matter for you in this election?
Local issues, but taxation. I feel for the young. I've got a grandson in his 20s, and he can't afford to buy his own home. He lives at home at the moment, and I would like to see more help for the youngsters, really.
More help for the youngsters. Interesting, because the Tory party came out with that plan for national service a couple of weeks ago, guys. Guys, we're going to stop this right now, just for a few moments. We've got a fantastic dog down there as well. That's the noise that you're hearing. But we are here with our People's Panel all day in Bassetlaw in Retford, talking about the issues that matter to local people.
Fantastic stuff. Looking forward to getting back there, because it's always, that's what GB News is about, talking to real people in real parts of the country, not always just stuck in Westminster.
Yes, and not always just having to listen to us talk about it. It is very interesting to see what lots of people are still undecided, I get the impression, not quite sure where they're going to put their vote. But anyway, coming up, we'll be crossing over live to Glasgow. Why? Because fans are kicking off celebrations ahead of the Euros tonight. This is Good Afternoon Britain. We're on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, it's 12:32. I'm Sophia Wemsler in the GB newsroom. Your headlines. The Prime Minister says a vote for Reform UK risks handing a blank cheque to the Labour Party. A new poll by YouGov puts Nigel Farage's party neck and neck with the Tories less than 3 weeks before the election. But they also caution that Britain's voting system means Reform may still struggle to pick up any seats. Meanwhile, Labour scored 37%, down 1 point, while the Liberal Democrats also lost a point, scoring 14%, with the Greens on 7 points. Specialist mental health hubs would be set up under a plan by Labour to help get people back to work, with an extra 8,500 new staff. Depression and anxiety are among the most common conditions that force people out of work, while an estimated 1.2 million people are currently waiting for mental health treatment. Backing British farmers will be central to a plan set to be unveiled by the Liberal Democrats later. It would include financial help for farmers who are coping with expensive energy and production costs. The party's also tackling rising prices on the supermarket shelves, with a promise to end food poverty and ensure better food security. In other news, the US and Ukrainian presidents have signed a 10-year security agreement, bolstering Kyiv's defence and inching it closer towards NATO membership. The historic deal was signed on the sidelines of a G7 summit, which is currently taking place in southern Italy. It aims to guarantee support for Ukraine's war against Russia's invasion, even if Donald Trump were to win November's US election. And for the latest story, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
The latest GB News travel.
Hello to you, I'm Jules Buckley. The M6 on the southbound side at Wolverhampton and Walsall Junction 10. 2 lanes are coned off. There's a broken down lorry there causing delays. Also on the northbound side of the M5 from Junction 1 at West Bromwich up towards Oldbury Dudley at 2. Queues at the scene of a collision. Lane 1, the inside lane of 3 there is coned off. Also on the M5 northbound, this time in Somerset, Western Supermare up to Clevedon. That's Junction 21 to 20, slow going following an earlier collision. What I can see in the cameras, all the lanes now back open for business. Now the anti-clockwise M25, a lane closed on the exit slip coming off at St Albans Junction 22 for emergency repairs, and queues and 2 lanes shut northbound up the M3, a multi-vehicle bump, slow going, light water at 3 up towards the M25.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is about the Biden administration kind of resisting calls from Harry's lawyers whether or not this ongoing thing about releasing his visa records over the alleged, in Spare, he admitted to taking, remember his memoir Spare? He admitted to taking cocaine, marijuana and magic mushrooms. And a lot of people are saying, was he honest and truthful in his application, in his visa application? You have to say, have you taken drugs? He said no, and then in Spare he said yes. So I think this is absolutely fascinating. They're saying they can't release these records because there is a stigma attached to law enforcement records. Yes, there's a stigma attached to that, but then don't say... everybody else, if you write yes on a visa application, you will be chucked out of the United States. You will be denied entry. So I think this is fascinating that on this issue of whether there is a stigma for Harry or not, he can have his law enforcement records not released into the public domain.
The bottom line is, do we want him back?
So what's interesting is it seems to be becoming a political dividing line in the States because Biden is the administration trying to do Harry a favour by keeping them under wraps, but Trump has promised that he will, the file will be made public if he wins again.
Trump's been very strong on this. He said, if Harry lied, then he's out.
The one thing about America is their politicians make ours look sane. Which is saying something.
I'm slightly confused about this whole story because, OK, sure, Prince Harry has said this. How many pop stars, rock stars, movie stars,
the difference is, well, I don't think it's just British. I think millions of Brits, to be fair to them, lie on the form every year. Millions of people from around the world lie on the form every year. Not, of course,
I'm not going to name any pop star specifically, but I would be mightily surprised if any hadn't indulged in what...
Yes, but of course they haven't given written evidence in their biography that they have, and that's the difference.
Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 37 minutes past midday, and just before the break, we were in Retford in the Bassetlaw constituency. So here are those candidates. Brendan Clark-Smith is standing for the Conservative Party, Rachel Sarah Reeves for the Green Party, Frank Ward for the Reform UK Party, Helen Tamblyn-Saville for the Liberal Democrats, and Joe White for Labour. There are your choices.
Well, there you go. But all eyes are on Scotland tonight because they face hosts Germany in the opening match of the Euros 2024 at the Allianz Arena in Munich.
Well, Steve Clarke's side head into the tournament, picking up just 1 win out of 9 games, but their fans are really in the mood.
Really in the mood. We're now joined by our GB News reporter Jack Carson, who's in Glasgow ahead of tonight's big game. Jack, there are hundreds of thousands of Scots who are planning to go to Munich, but what's the atmosphere like in Glasgow?
Well, there's certainly some tension building in the air. We've already seen quite a few people with their Scotland shirts on already, walking around with Scottish flags. We've got some sellers in the background as well that have been selling Scotland flags to people walking by. And as you can imagine, as the afternoon goes on, those pubs are really going to start to get busy. The atmosphere builds. The rain certainly probably keeping people away at the moment. But these Scottish fans know just how exciting today is, just how momentous this day is, not only to be back in their second consecutive European Championship. They had to wait 23 years until 2021 to get back into the European Championship. Steve Clarke is the first Scottish manager to get them to back-to-back tournaments. And Andy Robertson, who's the Scotland captain and left-back, of course, for Liverpool, has said that they don't want to come away from this tournament with any regrets. You know, they had a disappointing tournament in 2021. They did get to play here in Scotland in front of a few Scotland fans because of the COVID restrictions back then, but they'll be hoping that they come back with something to shout about and something to cheer. Of course, they've got nothing to lose. They know they're the underdogs in their group, alongside Germany, of course, Switzerland and Hungary, and they're the lowest ranked side in their group. But that surely gives them an extra edge going into tonight's opening match against Germany. They know they've got nothing to lose. The hosts know they've got everything to lose. The pressure is on their shoulders because there's a lot of German fans that want them to come away with the win, because of course it was back in 2014, a decade ago, when Germany last won a major tournament, winning the 2014 World Cup out in Brazil. Of course, we've seen the pictures today of 200,000, it's thought, Scotland fans in Munich. There's only 10,000 that can get into the game, but there's plenty of the Tartan Army cheering on over there in Munich. But just how are the Scotland fans that we've spoken to here in Glasgow feeling? Take a look.
I'm not the best when it comes to football, but I think Germany is a strong team, but I like to think Scotland does have a decent chance.
Aye, so what's Scotland's chances against Germany?
3-1 to Deutschland.
Do you not have any positivity? Where's the...
I can't see it, buddy. Because I will beat Gibraltar.
Uh-huh.
Remember the morning?
But we were first to qualify.
There were 2-0 up there night, and it can pull back to 2 each. I think Clark's factory's got fun, isn't it? It's playing class now, Tony.
Well, I think we've got to give it a go. We've got to give it our best shot and make sure that we can do it. I think that as long as we're cheering and giving it our all, we'll be all right. I mean, we have to band together, otherwise there's just no hope.
And you bet, obviously, if it ever comes that England are playing against Scotland.
I think my train's late. I've got to go, guys.
Strong, mate. They've got us.
Yeah, see, that's how you do it. You're the first person.
There we go, a bit of a mixed reaction on the streets of Glasgow. I mean, we're in George Square, where no doubt a little bit later on there's bound to be plenty of people here celebrating the start of the European Championship and cheering on Scotland, because they've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. Germany have got the pressure on their shoulders tonight at 8 o'clock.
Fantastic stuff, Jack. And I can't help but note, George Square is the square that the local SNP council want to get rid of a lot of the statues. But I think there's a statue right next to you, so they haven't quite got rid of these statues yet, by the looks of it.
Yes.
Yeah, no, they're still all there. That's good to see, although slightly damp. Well, there we go. Thanks very much for joining us, Jack Carson. Now, coming up...
Yes, I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? The old statues. Statues could be removed from George Square permanently. 11 statues to be removed to storage for restoration. I thought this was for political reasons, Tom.
So they say they're going to remove them for restoration, but they'll only put the ones back that pass a whole lot of tests.
The slavery and colonial legacy test.
Yeah, which, given that Glasgow was a big port city...
There's going to be a lot of them.
There are quite a few links, aren't there?
I hate this. Just leave the statues where they are. If you have to, put a little notice board explaining some of the, problematic things about that character, that person, that historical figure. Don't just rip them down. Absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, good luck to Scotland.
Or maybe put up some figures of the great emancipation movement from this country. I mean, let's get some more statues of William Wilberforce around this country, and I'm sure there are lots of Scottish Presbyterians who we should know a lot more about, who are a big part of that anti-slavery movement. I mean, why don't we talk more about the English, Scottish, Welsh and Irish people who helped end the slave trade, as we did the first major country to end that evil trade. We don't talk about that enough.
We don't talk about that enough. But coming up, as Nigel Farage appears to be trumping the Tories in the latest YouGov poll, is there truth to it? How accurate is this? How many MPs could reform return to Parliament? We'll break it down with a YouGov spokesperson.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Low pressure firmly in charge today and over the next few days. Blustery showers, some brighter spells in between the downpours, but it is staying unsettled with low pressure sitting to the west of Scotland and various showery bands of rain sweeping around that low, combined with a gusty wind, that wind particularly notable around the southwest coast and the far north of Scotland, where there'll be some bands of more persistent rain at times. Otherwise, the downpours will be moving through and there'll be some brighter weather in between. And temperatures not as low as they have been, with those values returning closer to average, although not feeling particularly pleasant because of the frequent downpours and the gusty wind. So around the coast of Devon and Cornwall, 12 or 13 Celsius, frequent showers moving through. Brighter spells for a time later in the day for Northern England, North Wales, so it's not a complete washout, but those showers really getting going across parts of Northern Ireland. And for central and northern Scotland in particular, we'll see more prolonged rain. So for some, it will rain for several hours. Others will see some decent drier spells as we end the day and go into the evening, but further wet weather sweeps through across the southwest into the early hours of Saturday. And again, we've got those persistent outbreaks of rain in the far north of Scotland. Otherwise, some clear spells about, but it's not going to be as cool overnight as it has been during recent nights because of the breeze and because we've got a slightly milder source of air compared with the northerlies that we saw earlier in the week. Nevertheless, low pressure in control on Saturday. Further showers, some thunderstorms and some more prolonged outbreaks of rain as well. A very blustery day and an unsettled weekend to come.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel. Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 47 minutes past 12. Now, we're hearing soon from Reform UK leader Nigel Farage. He's holding a press conference in London after this remarkable poll for the party was published last night.
Yes, for the first time, Reform UK have overtaken the Conservatives in a YouGov poll for the Times. Now, Labour remain way ahead. Their support has slightly dropped, though, by 1 point to 37 points.
Well, to break this down for us and what it all means is the Director of Political Analytics at YouGov, Patrick English. Patrick, first of all, YouGov has changed its methodology in the last week or so. Is that what's driving this?
Good afternoon, thanks for having me. No, under the old methodology, we would have shown the same result here. What we are seeing is a surge for support for Reform UK in our sample, driven very much by the fact that Nigel Farage announced that he was standing and put forward himself as a candidate in Clacton, and also said that he would be taking over as leader of the party. And that prompted Reform to go up from around about 13, 14 points in our polling, up now to the high of 19. And it must be said as well, 19 is absolutely, of course, a bigger number than 18, but Polls like this are subject to a margin of error, statistical noise, so we can't rule out at all that the two parties are in fact tied or that the Conservatives might still be a little bit ahead. But certainly a symbolic moment for Nigel Farage and for Reform UK in that they are, according to our estimates, 1 point ahead. But again, I must say, with polling, that is as good as saying it's pretty much a dead heat.
Very interesting indeed. Did you ask any supplementary questions that show that this is the Nigel Farage effect, or are you just guessing that because this has happened since?
Yeah, we're projecting it based off the change that we've noticed pretty much since the day after Nigel Farage said that he was standing. And indeed, our MRP poll, our first projection of the race, was released sort of an hour after he made that announcement. So no data from post-Farage announcement was included in that. So we're very much looking forward to seeing what happens to the Reform seat projections. We had them on 0 last week, but I think we might expect that to increase at least a couple, maybe 2, anything up to 4 perhaps, in our next projection, which will be released next week. And indeed, it is seemingly very much driven by Farage. He is a character who appeals very strongly to a very certain subset of the electorate. He goes down very well with Brexit voters. And what we can say is that in this latest poll, around 1/3 of those who voted Brexit in 2016 are now intending to vote for Reform UK. That far outstrips the amount who are currently planning to vote for Labour or the Conservatives. So we think this is very much a Farage effect. And it'll be interesting to see what effect that has on the MRP projections that we will be releasing next week.
I'm sure all political nerds will be rubbing their hands with glee awaiting this new multi-level regression and post-stratification analysis.
You had to get that out.
I had to get that. But Patrick, there's been some criticism of YouGov in terms of the sample that you're using. You do have higher Reform numbers than some other pollsters. The criticism is that this online polling picks up very engaged people, that people who are sort of perhaps paying more attention to politics than the average voter, who might know a bit more about Reform UK than the average voter.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly the case that in online polls, of course, you have to be online to take part in them. And the online community is perhaps not completely representative of Britain overall. But we do things to try and mitigate for that in our sampling and in our modelling of the voting outcomes, including controlling for political interests. So we make sure we don't have too many people that are sort of self-professed political nerds who are looking forward to MRP polls in our samples. We also make sure that we represent in terms of past vote, in terms of education levels, things that we all know tend to drive vote intention. And I will say as well that, of course, online polls have their own particular biases, but so do phone polls. The sort of person who picks up a phone poll and is happy to sort of sit there and go through an unknown number, asking them a bunch of questions, they don't sort of know who they are, really what it's being used for, that's also a particular type of person, in the same way that a person who's decided they want to join a YouGov panel is. So all methods come with their own strengths and weaknesses, and I think it's important for us to all continually acknowledge that polling is a science, but it's also subject to error, and it's also subject to sort of challenges, and we do our best to work our way through that and hopefully present the best possible accurate analysis of what's happening out there right now.
Yes, I was going to ask whether you still do the phone calls, because I remember when I got one phone call from, I'm not sure if it was YouGov or another polling company, I was very excited. Yeah. To be asked all the questions. Thank you very much indeed. We'll have to leave it there, but very interesting to find out a little bit more about that poll. Patrick English, who is the Director of Political Analytics at YouGov.
Yeah, I don't think there are any pollsters who only use phone polls left in the UK. They were, back in 2016, it was about half and half during the referendum. And there was a definite split between those who polled on the internet and those who polled by phone.
Yeah.
But basically everyone does it on the internet now. I think there might be 1 or 2 who still do phone polls, but it's very few and far between. And absolutely no one does the original form of polling, which was literally going door to door for a representative sample.
Well, people don't open the door, apparently, now to anyone political, because they've got these ring bells or whatever they're called.
Oh, yes.
Where you can see...
Record a little video.
Yes, no, I don't fancy that. I'll just pretend I'm not in.
Of course, Nigel Farage is standing in the Clacton constituency, but here is who else is standing there. Jovan Owusu-Nepal is the Labour Party candidate, Giles Watling, the Conservative Party candidate, Matthew Bensalem is the Liberal Democrat Party candidate, Nigel, of course, standing for Reform UK, Natasha Osborne, the Green Party, Craig Jamieson, the Climate Party, Tony Mack, an independent, Tassos Papanas... Sue is the Heritage Party candidate. I'm sure I butchered that. Apologies. And
Sorry
Andrew
to
Pemberton is UKIP. Apologies to Greece. Apologies to anyone of good pronunciation ability.
Yeah, well, there are lots of candidates in that constituency.
Do you know what? There were so many fewer until Nigel Farage announced he was standing the day before nominations, and then a whole bunch more people came in, which means when we have to read out these lists, it just gets more and more annoying.
Oh, we've got a little bit of time for some of your views. Dennis says Labour, certainly with their current team, in quotation marks he puts, and son of a toolmaker leader, are totally unqualified to form a government.
Debbie says we pray for Scotland when they play Germany tonight.
And Paul says a vote for Conservatives is a vote for more of the same: high taxes, rising unemployment, long NHS waits, sky-high immigration, low taxes for the rich. Well, there you go. Keep them coming in.
And I do think that there is that huge problem for many incumbent governments around the world right now, when the global economy is where it is, not a lot of enthusiasm.
No, but very shortly we're going to be hearing from the Reform Party leader, Nigel Farage. He's due to speak in just a few minutes, so stay with us. This is Good Afternoon Britain.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest Met Office weather forecast for GB News. Heavy showers dominating the country's weather over the next few days. Gusty winds, some sunny spells in between the downpours. They'll be in short supply because low pressure is firmly positioned to the west of Scotland. It's going to become slow moving over the next few days, and it's going to continue to drive heavy downpours in from the southwest. With a gusty wind as well, that's going to be particularly noticeable for the southwest of England and northern Scotland. Northern Scotland subject to more persistent rain overnight, tending to ease later on. Another band of more persistent rain moves into Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, with some clearer and drier spells further east across England and central and southern Scotland. However, temperatures are not falling as far as previous nights because we've lost that cold Arctic wind. We've replaced it with low pressure and unsettled weather, so it's not going to be a pleasant start to the weekend. There'll be further heavy showers or longer spells of rain. The wettest weather there for Saturday morning across North Wales, parts of Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland. Some sunshine, though, for central belts into the Grampians, Highlands, Western Isles, the far north of Scotland, Shetland in particular. A lot of cloud and outbreaks of rain. So very mixed conditions across the country on Saturday morning, and things don't really improve into the afternoon, with further showers building, and just about anywhere could see a heavy downpour, even a thunderstorm developing into the afternoon. A gusty wind continues across the south and southwest. Meanwhile, those showers will be interspersed by some sunny spells, but it's not going to feel particularly warm in the sunshine. Highs of 17 or 18 Celsius. Now, for Saturday evening, we'll see further showers rotating around the area of low pressure, which by this stage is centred just off the east of Scotland. And into Monday and Tuesday, that low tends to fill and move away, so fewer showers, a better chance of some sunshine.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
It's our summer spectacular. 3 top prizes that have to be won. There's cash. £15,000 in tax-free cash to spend on anything you like this summer. Plus a brand new iPhone 15 with a set of Apple AirPods. And if that wasn't enough, we'll also treat you to some fun in the sun with £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction this summer. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
farmers across the country are inviting us all to learn more about food production and sustainable farming techniques.
It's an annual event organised by the farming charity Leaf, and it's aimed to show people really how food is produced in the countryside. Do you know, I'm a bit surprised about this. I would have thought the last thing you want is a load of, you know, city types like us traipsing all across your farm and stopping production.
What will people learn, do you think, Colin?
That basically farmers are nice people and we produce good food. We don't mess up our food. It's the manufacturers that mess up our food. We produce very safe food and we love doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised you guys keep going with the dedication you do. I know you love the land and you love your work, but you only have to watch Clarkson's farm to see how hard it is for you. Maybe if we ordinary people appreciate what you do, you'll get a better deal from the politicians.
We won't talk about politics today, but, but my view is that we love farming, we love passing on our skills and knowledge and showing people that we're nice people and not that's betrayed by the public. Clarkson Farm has showed how hard it is. That's the reason why we have Open Farm Sundays, to try and get some of these young people down on the farm to see where their food comes from. You know, where the milk comes from, where the beef comes from, where eggs come from, where chicken, you know, their lambs come from. And they need to know and they need to understand food production in the world is on a knife edge. We have politicians wanting us to grow wild flowers instead of food. But we want to grow food to feed the British public.
Yeah, and we've
The People's Channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Friday, the 14th of June. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Nigel speaks at the Reform Party's first press conference since one poll found the fated crossover point. With the Tories now ducking into third place, 1 point behind Nigel Farage's party. What's next in store?
Labour tax attack. The Tories come out all guns blazing on what they describe as Labour's 18 tax rises, from parents' tax to pensions tax to family home tax. But what's the truth? We'll speak to both sides.
And it's kick-off time for the Euros 2024. Scotland will play Germany in a tense opening game. We'll be soaking up the atmosphere in Scotland and in Germany.
And as the Euros 2024 kick off in Germany, why do we have lots of pride flags adorning the capital's Regent Street instead of the St George's flag? Well, that's our debate shortly. Now, we are waiting for Nigel Farage to speak at this first Reform press conference since that YouGov poll that we were just talking about a few minutes ago that showed Reform has overtaken the Conservatives, at least in that poll. This is the scene in the room. We can see a lone lectern against a wood panel background with what looks like a fairly makeshift sellotaped on A4 bit of paper that has Britain Needs Reform written on it.
Well, Nigel Farage did say that we need to make efficiencies in spending. So, you know, what's wrong with a bit of a laminated card?
No, this is very much an upstart party, and I suppose you can see it with that laminated bit of paper. But I have to say, doing it inside on a day like today, where in London it is raining, perhaps is a bit wiser than what Rishi Sunak had come to decide to do when this election was called.
Yes, quite possibly. Quite possibly. The memes did design themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think all politicians have perhaps taken a note to find a room, any room, preferably with some wood panelling. And here we can see the chairman of Reform UK, Richard Tice. Let's listen in.
Everybody, great to see you. Thank you for being here at relatively short notice. Well. It's fair to say that in just 2 weeks, we have turned what looked like being the most boring general election campaign since any of us could remember to the most interesting and extraordinary campaign. 2 weeks ago, everyone was writing Reform UK off thought the big squeeze would be happening. But actually, we were talking about what millions and millions of people up and down the country wanted to talk about. And that's the population increase. That's why we're getting poorer. It's about immigration. That's what ordinary folk want to talk about. But of course, the main parties didn't want to talk about that. And in that first week of the campaign, we held in the polls, as everyone thought we would disappear downwards. And then a week last Monday, Nigel joined the campaign big time. And we've been heading north in the polls. I'm loving being out campaigning. And what's remarkable is what's happening out there, up and down the country. The noise, the activity. The word is spreading like something we've never known before. I'm loving getting messages from all over the country, from people I haven't heard of for ages. Have you heard this? The whole pub's talking about it. The pub came out, people came out from the pub when there was a Reform candidate and cheered and clapped. The fact that there's a sign on a bridge on the M6 saying vote Reform is also pretty extraordinary, but it's just indicative of the enthusiasm for something else apart from the boring status quo of the main two parties, for whom, frankly, there is not a jot of difference. They both stand for higher taxes. They're sort of competing in these debates. Who's going to raise taxes more than the other? Something is significant and going on out there. But what no one expected, no one really believed could possibly actually happen. As we went up in the polls and the Conservatives started to slide in the polls. How far could they slide? Well, that was the question. How far could we go up? Could we get equal to them in certain areas? Could we get equal to them nationally? No one expected within less than 2 weeks, in fact, less than 12 days, we wouldn't bother with equalling in the polls. No, we would leapfrog them in the polls, using the Rolls-Royce of pollsters, no less. So last night, just a few minutes before the seven-way leaders debate, there it was. Everywhere across the whole of the media, that Reform UK was 1% ahead of the Conservatives in the polls. Now, if that, folks, is not momentum, if that is not activity, I don't know what is. And so we're upsetting all the right people. At the beginning of this week, of course, we upset the banking industry. From the press conference we gave on Monday, we talked about how actually the truth is that the big banks, the Bank of England, are ripping off taxpayers. You know you're making progress when the big banks' lobby groups start to attack us. And that is because Reform UK is on the side of ordinary working folk. And it's pretty clear that we're the only party that is. That's why we're going up in the polls. That's why everybody's talking about us. That's why we've got the momentum, the noise, the activity. It is truly. That's why we're holding this press conference following that last night, so that we can hear from the leader of Reform UK and then you can ask some questions. So I'm delighted to welcome to the lectern, the podium, my good friend, leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage.
Well, good morning, everybody. It was on Monday, and I said to you, something is happening out there. There is a momentum behind what Reform UK are doing. And of course, there's always a lag time between understanding what's happening on the ground and seeing it playing out in the polls. I also told you that some of the polling industry were acting entirely dishonestly, and I'm pleased to say, as a result of my letter to the chair of the British Polling Council, they have been told now they really ought to be prompting for reform. So they're all playing catch-up. I also said 3 or 4 weeks ago that I thought reform would get more votes in this general election than the Conservative Party, and I absolutely believe that now to be the case. So yes, it was a delight last night to see that the inflection point has arrived. The momentum that Richard and I are seeing on the streets and on the doors through, and we are 1 point ahead of the Conservatives. But just bear this in mind. We are well ahead of the Conservatives in the North East, in the North West, in Yorkshire and the Humber, in the East Midlands, in the West Midlands, and in parts of Eastern Region. And in what we all call the red wall seats, we are significantly ahead of the Conservatives. And so I think Penny Morgan was a little bit shocked last night on the ITV debate. I don't think she had a very good evening, really, all round, because they're still pumping out the same line, that if you vote for reform, you will get Labour. But the inflection point means that actually, if you vote Conservative in the red wall, you will almost certainly get Labour. A Conservative vote in the red wall is now a wasted vote. We are the challengers to Labour. We are now the real opposition. And this needs to be reflected. As I said, it's beginning to be reflected by the polling industry, but it needs to be reflected by the broadcasters as well, because Ofcom, on the guidance they've given to broadcasters, say that really the most important of all the factors is the performance in the last two general elections. We haven't stood in the last two general elections. It's as if everything about our politics is designed to stop new boys and girls coming in and to keep everything the same. At the moment, broadcasters are giving our party 8% of their coverage, which clearly is nowhere near in line with where we actually are. But there's something else I want to ask for today. The BBC will be having a leaders' debate, a four-way leaders' debate with the leader of the Liberal Democrats, the Conservatives, Labour and the SNP, and that takes place next week. And I think we can demand of right now that the BBC put us into that debate. I would also very much like to do a debate head-to-head with Keir Starmer. And the reason is very simple. We think that this should be the immigration election, because whether we're talking about rents, whether we're talking about housing availability, whether we're talking about access to GP services, whether we're talking about pressure on infrastructure, there is no aspect of our national life that is not touched by the massive population crisis this country now faces, directly as a result of immigration policies that were started by Labour but accelerated by this Conservative government. And I thought it was very interesting to see the Labour manifesto, where Keir Starmer lays out his 6 priorities for the country. And not one of those 6 was mass migration into Britain. So we're very much of the view that nothing will change under Labour. Who knows? It may even get a little bit worse. I would love, as I'm now the leader of the opposition, I would now love... Well, I thought that was fairly obvious to everybody. I would love to do a head-to-head with Keir Starmer to ask him why. Why, if you're going out looking for the working people of Britain to vote for you, have you not put this in your top 6 priorities? What is for certain, people are beginning to realise this, is the election is over. Labour have won. It's merely a debate about the size of their majority, but perhaps more importantly, who is going to be the opposition voice to Labour in the House of Commons and in the country? Well, you may say to me, perhaps it'll be Sir Ed Davey, when he's not falling off logs or on kiddie slides or whatever he may be doing. But Ed Davey can't provide real opposition to a Labour government about which we know in terms of policy really precious little, because Ed Davey agrees with the Labour Party on most substantive issues. And it isn't going to be Rishi Sunak leading the opposition. I mean, he'll probably be in California anyway, and the Conservatives will choose someone, and they probably won't last very long, and they can't provide opposition because they are hopelessly split down the middle on policy. In fact, they've spent more of the last 4 years fighting each other than they have fighting for the interests of the country. And I'm putting it to you that I believe I can be that voice of opposition. I'm pretty clear and consistent in what I stand up for. I'm not afraid of a fight. I don't bow to Twitter pressure or the mob on the streets. I've taken on the European Union, I've taken on the big banks, and I'm pretty certain I can take on a Labour government headed by Keir Starmer that will have almost no honeymoon period whatsoever, will inherit some very, very deep problems, and I don't think has the radical solutions to sort the country out. So my message to the country is thank you, but come on, join the revolt. What have you got to lose? You've been so let down, frankly betrayed, by the Conservatives after their 2019 win, that it really is time for something new. We're excited about this. We've got up 9 pips in the polls over the course of the last 10 days. I don't know where this ends, but I do feel momentum, optimism is out there with us. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. So, that's the formal bit. Then we'll take some questions from the media. I think Chris just beat the two Chris's. Chris Hope just beat the Chris Mason in that race. Chris Hope.
Can I just ask, when you ask a question, then you want to stand up if it's a camera. Chris Hope, GBNews. Nigel Farage, we've been here before in 2015. You get all these votes piled up and one MP in 2015. What will change this time? If you get maybe 4 MPs, as David Bull told GBNews last night, and you're in second place, and the Tories are in third place, and they get 80 or 100 MPs, what does that say about our electoral system?
Well, first things first, Chris. We got 4 million votes. When I led UKIP in 2015, we got 4 million votes. And you're quite right, 1 seat. You know, never in the history of British elections had so many votes counted for so few seats. And I was deeply frustrated by it, and I'll admit, pretty wounded by it. I mean, wounded to the point where I pretty much said to myself, I never ever want to do this again. But here I am, back out of retirement again. We're not going to get 4 million votes. We're not going to get 5 million votes. We're going to get a very, very substantial number of votes. I genuinely think we can get over 6 million votes. I don't know where the ceiling is. But when you start to get through, I mean, think about the Liberal Democrats. Now, albeit they've got a much more developed ground game than we've got, and we know that, but the Liberal Democrats sort of went from 10 seats to 50 seats by just getting through that electoral threshold. Whether we get through it this time or not, I don't know. But remember, this is not a short-term commando raid. This is a 5-year commitment. This election is our first step towards building for 2029. So however many seats we win, you have my absolute assurance that our campaigning for the 29 election, our building of a big movement in this country, will begin the very next day, on July the 5th. If we did finish up with a huge number of votes and a paltry number of seats, do you know what it would do? It would tell us, yet again, that Britain is broken and Britain needs reform. And that reform includes the electoral system, that reform includes the abomination that is the House of Lords, and that reform includes the right, as people in Switzerland have, to call referendums on key issues if they think their government and parliament are out of touch with them. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Mason, BBC.
Thank you, Chris Mason, BBC News. Mr. Farage, give us an insight into your dreams when you're at the shaving mirror in the morning. It's difficult, isn't it, for smaller parties to make an imprint in the House of Commons, however well you do, however popular you are. Are you dreaming of the moment of being the leader of the opposition, standing there at the dispatch box, potentially throwing questions at Prime Minister Starmer if he wins?
Thank you. What I see in the shaving mirror every morning, looking back at me, I think, gosh, where have the last 40 years gone? You know, but there you are. I'm sure I'm not the only one in the room that has that sensation. Well, I tell you what, I led a group in the European Parliament for 15 years. I was in seat number 20 with Mr. Barroso and then Mr. Juncker, who wasn't always sure he was there himself, but never mind. So, you know, I'm quite used to getting up in big chambers and asking questions of the French President or British Prime Ministers, or, I mean, I have actually done all this before, albeit in a different theatre of operations, but if you're asking me, am I capable of doing it? Yes. And maybe somebody better than me comes along. Maybe the Conservative Party fight. I think Penny Mordaunt was being lined up for it, but of course she's going to lose her seat, so that won't work. But if there's someone better than me to stand up there and provide opposition, then that's great. I'd be very, very happy if somebody younger, better than me comes along. But right at the minute, I do see myself as being that person. Yes, I do. And I have no confidence in the Conservative Party as it currently is to be even capable of providing opposition, so deep are the rifts within it. So, yeah, you know, I mean, I've made a huge decision. You know, as I say, I've come out of retirement. I'm in this for keeps.
Thank you very much, Chris. Henry Riley, LBC.
Thank you, Henry Riley from LBC. Did Dame Andrea Jenkins ask your permission to use a photograph of you since then, since you came back as leader, have any Conservative MPs, without naming them, and you won't, have any of them texted you or called you?
Oh, gosh, never lie at a press conference. It's very, very important. No, Andrea didn't ask my permission, but she did send me a very nice text saying, what do you think? Well, it was a bit late by then, wasn't it, really? I think the fact that Andrea did that just shows you that depth of division that exists within the Conservative Party. I mean, they are two completely different parties, and I think they muddled along for decades, with the odd row here and there, obviously. I think Brexit is the thing that highlighted what those fundamental divisions. You know, I mean, look, there are people in the Conservative Party that Richard and I feel politically aligned to, but they are in a very small minority. Of the 360 Conservative MPs that were elected in 2019, there's about 50, probably, that would take our view on many things in the world. The rest don't. And that was why, you know, when I went to the Conservative Party conference in Manchester last year, albeit with a GBNews badge on, you know, I was hailed like a hero for the membership, but most of the MPs sort of walked past and couldn't even look at me because I'm so absolutely ghastly. And if as we go forward, we establish this bridgehead in Parliament, and the splits in the Conservative Party become ever wider, and I suspect my presence will perhaps even help to widen those splits, then some of those people that we like will be very, very welcome to come to us. It's as simple as that.
Now, I've got a new game for you as well, actually.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, if you look at Conservative MPs' leaflets, I want you to try and count up how many times you see the word Conservative. I've looked at half a dozen, and I never got beyond the number of 2. And that was just on the imprint. So it's pretty extraordinary what is going on, how the brand has become so toxic. Let's take a question just here.
Hi, Rob Pollsters News. Isn't the most realistic way of you becoming leader of the opposition after this election to join the Tories? And can you rule that out?
Boring, boring, boring. No, they're done. The brand's done.
You can rule out joining the Tories to become MD.
That was very interesting. One of the polls at the weekend showed that 25% of 2019 Conservative voters want the party to get 0 seats. This isn't just a sort of change that happens election to election. This is a wholesale rejection by a significant number of Conservative voters who, by the way, if we weren't here, probably wouldn't vote for anybody, would stay at home. They are so disgusted with the political system. They feel absolutely betrayed by the promises that were made in 2019. The Conservative Party will not be in power for a decade, maybe more. And you know, you can say to me, well, look, they've been around for 190 years. But occasionally these big seismic shifts do happen. It happened in Britain in the 1920s, it happened in Canada in the early 1990s. I think this may well be one of those big 50 or 100-year events that happens even under first past the post politics. I mean, if we were in PR, we'd be talking a very, very different game. So no, the brand's broken. It's gone. It's done.
Just on the right there, yes, yeah.
Thank you. Claire Chapman from the iNewspaper. I just wanted to pick up on something that you said in the debate last night about agreeing that the two-child benefit cap should be scrapped. Should we expect that to be a Reform Party policy, or is that your personal opinion? And obviously that would add to the benefit scale. Are you very comfortable with that?
Yeah, look, I just feel, and we feel, that actually support for families is really rather important. We should be encouraging people to have children. We should even, perhaps through the tax system, be encouraging marriage as well. I mean, my own track record on this is not great, I've got to tell you. But despite that, there is very strong evidence that kids that are brought up within a married environment do better in life. So, do we believe as a party in encouragement for the family and the concept of the family? You bet your life we do.
So it would be a policy?
Yes.
Thank you. Calgary, just behind, there we go, and then just to your right.
Hello. You said the Tories are divided now, isn't it? You said the Tories are divided, and that's certainly true. But during the next Parliament, the right will have to unite in some way, given the electoral system that we have. So are you confident that Leader of the Opposition, Nigel Farage, can unite the right against Labour by 2029?
Oh, I think so, yes. And I think, if people... Well, I mean, who knows how many Tory MPs there are going to be there anyway? The number could be very small. And of course, the other problem they've got, and you see this in the polls in the last week, is the Liberal Democrats are on the rise, and that reflects tactical voting that is going on certainly in southern, central, southern and southwestern England. So who's to say how many MPs the Conservatives are even going to have? But look, if the Damien Green and Jeremy Hunt wing want to go and join the Liberal Democrats, I'd have thought they'd be very, very at home there, frankly.
Just to your right, yes, the gentleman just to Chris's left. There we are, yeah, thanks.
Hi. I'm Emilio from Politico. The Conservatives are obviously trying to make this election about tax in terms of their dividing line with Labour. They're shouting about the fact that under Labour's plans, the tax burden as a percentage of GDP would rise to 37.4%. But they're being quieter about the fact that under the Conservative plans, it would rise to 36.8%, less than a percentage different. Do you think that is a Conservative-style tax plan? And I know you're launching your manifesto on Monday, your contract on Monday. Yeah. Could you give us an idea, at least, of where that kind of number you wanted to be if it was a reform tax plan?
I mean, look, this argument that's going on over tax, and I've been in two of these debates with Angela Rayner and Penny Mordaunt. You're going to put taxes up. No, you're going to put taxes up more. I mean, mindless stuff. Quite how the Conservatives have got the front to say we're a low-tax party, having increased the tax burden to the highest level it's been since 1948, is completely and utterly beyond me. The answer is they're both going to put taxes up because they're going to freeze the thresholds, and that means dragging in. 40p was top rate from the late 1980s all the way through the Blair years. That was accepted as the top rate of tax. If you earned a lot of money, you paid 40p, and throughout that time, about 1.5 million people paid pretty consistently through that period of time. By the end of 2027, under current plans, 8 million people will be paying 40p tax, and that to me illustrates just what's happened, just where the tax burden's gone up in Britain. And we've got a radical plan, very radical plan, to reduce the tax burden so that someone who's a staff nurse should not be paying 40p tax. So we would up that threshold to 70,000, which strikes us as being realistic, as a place where 40p kicks in. But more significantly, what we will be unveiling and explaining fully and talking about on Monday, and you're quite right, it's not a manifesto, because the word association with manifesto is lie, so we're not going to play that game. It'll be our contract, and it'll be what we're going to campaign for in opposition, the arguments that we're going to make in opposition. We're not pretending we're going to be in government. We're not. Not this time, anyway. So the radical plan is to raise the level at which people start paying tax to £20,000 a year. It'll be a mass simplification of a tax system. It will take many, many pensioners whose incomes are now being dragged into the tax system, out of a tax system. It'll take a total of 7 million people completely out of tax. It'll mean fewer civil servants, isn't that good? But it'll also, more significantly, genuinely give those on benefits the incentive to go to work. And I think, sometimes we talk about people on benefits, and perhaps people use slightly pejorative term about those on benefits. Well, actually, many are trapped, completely trapped. They go back to work, they work more than 16 hours, they start to lose in tax what they're gaining, they may as well just stay on benefits. And this is a real way to get people back to work, and if we do that and succeed with that, which we think, understanding human nature as we believe we do that it will, that means less reliance on unskilled, cheap foreign labour. Now, I know the big employers will scream and shout because they become addicted to cheap foreign labour. So I think what we've got to say on tax is actually radical and genuinely interesting, and we will outline all of it on Monday.
Thank you. Only yesterday, I mean, it really is a very serious issue. I had 2 pensioners yesterday say, you give with the one hand where pensions go up, but all of a sudden it's all gone in tax. And you say, what's the point? It's a massive, massive issue. ITV.
Thanks very much. Harry Wilson, ITV News. I stand up under restriction. This is clearly a moment for your campaign. Are you ready to take advantage of this? Do you know where these voters are? Are you able to get your supporters out on polling day? Is your party in a state to capitalise on this moment?
It's a very good question. Not really. No, I mean, look, we're not as organised and as developed as the Liberal Democrats. They are very, very good at their ground game. They've got a network of councillors they built up across the country. To be honest with you, we admit we're not in that position. So the way that we do it, and it's back really to Chris Hope's question right at the very beginning, the only way we can do this is we have to get the total number of votes well up over that 6 million figure, and if we do that, we will start to break through and win seats. So is there a ground game for us? Yes. Are people now coming forward enthusiastically to help us? Yes. Are people coming forwards and giving us 25 quid or more to join the party or support the party? Yes. Money is flowing in through the door, support and help is coming in. Look, I'd have loved 6 months of this. I'd have loved 6 months of this, but we haven't got 6 months. We've got 3 more weeks. We're making the best of what we can, but I do think there's a very, very big gap in the electoral market out there. If none of the above was on the voting paper, quite a lot of people would have been tempted by that. I also think what we'll do is we'll bring people out to vote who the other parties can't reach anyway, because they will have been non-voters before, and a significant chunk of our vote already are people who otherwise would not vote. So look, are we fully in a position to capitalise from this? No. But are we doing our best as we go? Yes. And if we can win that really big mass audience, then I think we'll surprise even ourselves with how many seats we can win. Look, it's an if. Of course it is. Everything in an election is. But I do think momentum and trend is with us.
It's actually one of the saddest things you hear on the doors, where people say, it's not worth it, it won't make a difference. This time round, actually, I think there is a sense of belief that it can make a difference, that it's a journey. It just feels very, very different to before. Yes, gentlemen, just there.
Thank you very much. Jochen Wittmer, German News Weekly, please cite. Mr. Farage, if you would allow a question from the German perspective.
Of course.
You know, there is a similar party in Germany which manages to tap into the pool of disenfranchised voters who have left the Conservative Party and also the Social Democratic Party. Now this party, the AfD, they have also grown very quickly, and they ran into the problem that a number of their candidates held views that were quite damaging to the party. So how do you want to prevent running into similar?
No, it's a good question. I mean, the AFD. I mean, I knew the founders of the AFD, and I saw them in the European Parliament. And of course, it was actually founded by academics who were really worried about Germany's place in the euro, and that was the main thing that got the party going. Yeah, look, they've had some real wrong-uns in the AFD, not at grassroots level, but at quite senior elected level, out in, as you know better than me, out in some of the Länder. All I can tell you is this: in my previous incarnation as leader of UKIP, I had an absolute rule that nobody who'd ever been part of the British National Party or any organisation like that could even be a member of the party, let alone a candidate. And I was absolutely ruthless about that. And I think because I did that, I would honestly say to you, I did more to destroy the British National Party as an electoral force in Britain than absolutely anybody else. And the same thing applies this time. And of course, because it's been a very rapidly called election, and because 450 of our candidates have never stood before, they're not sophisticated politicos, they will have liked things on Facebook with links to somebody else. It doesn't make them extreme right or far right. I don't want support from people like that. I've never had the support and worked with people like that. I never will support people like that. I'm as acutely aware of the problem. We are in a better place with all of that than the AFD. Of that I have no doubt. And yes, of course, we're going to have our problems with candidates, as every party is, with a very, very rushed election. But it's funny, really, even though there are 651 seats up for grabs in the Commons, in most of the United Kingdom, there are really only 3 names people are going to vote for. They're going to vote for Sunak, Starmer or Farage, and that's the reality.
Just there, hi.
Hi, Sophie Hastison from the Daily Mirror. So lots of people obviously got to see you again on I'm a Celebrity last year.
Lots of me, yeah.
Your former campaign, Fred Sirius, has said that after spending 3 weeks with you in a jungle, he doesn't think that you have a vision and he thinks that you just rant. What's your response to that?
Jolly good, Fred. Happy birthday.
Just to the front here, yes.
Thank you very much, Tom Scott from the Sun newspaper. One of your questions been put to you in Dover and questions been put to you in Clacton, and both sides just sort of bat it away rather speculatively. But now, as you say, the inflection point has happened. It might be one you're slightly more happy to answer. And that is, how many seats do you think you can get, or how many seats are you targeting? And if you won't give us a straight number, if the ballot box gods came down from the sky on July 4 and say, Nigel Farage, you can win in Clacton on seat, but that is it, there is one Reform MP in Parliament. Is that a deal you would take, or would you charge your arm with the electorate?
Oh no, if you gave me a chance now to say, would I take Clacton and nothing else, I'd say no. Absolutely not. We will win many more seats than Clacton. How many? Well, perhaps I can be more specific now than I've been before with you. I've literally got no idea. I don't know. I haven't got a clue.
What's your target?
I haven't got a target. I'm travelling optimistically, doing the best I can, building what's going to become a very, very big mass movement over the course of the next 5 years. Just you watch.
Just here.
Thanks, Camilla Long, Sunday Times. Nigel, leading on from the last question, are we to take it then that Clacton is not enough for you?
Clacton is not enough. That I will agree with, yes.
What are you going to do for the people of Clacton?
Do what I do and have done for many, many years when I was an MEP. It's quite interesting. If I write a letter to banks or authorities or people with whom constituents have problems, they generally jump up and start to do things. So I do think I could be a champion for local people who've got problems with, they might be running their own business or whatever it is, and I can do that for them. But, you know something? Clacton is at the end of the line. It's the terminus. It can be easily forgotten. And it would be accurate to say that, of course, it has had some levelling up money, that's true, but kind of once levelling up money is spent, that's sort of it, really. You get a few pretty new buildings or whatever it may be. What I would hope to do, can't promise, what I'd hope to do.
Well, there we have Nigel Farage just talking about the constituency he's standing in this election. Before that, of course, he was talking about how the Reform Party is now second place, according to YouGov's latest poll. and he demanded a 4-person debate between himself, the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition and Ed Davey as well. He sees this as an era of 4-party politics.
Yes, definitely. He was very much taking it to Ofcom, the broadcasting regulator, but he mentioned the Clacton constituency where he is standing, so we'll let you know the other candidates there. You've got Yovan Owusu-Napul for the Labour Party, Giles Watling, Conservative Party, Matthew Ben-Silem, Liberal Democrats, Nigel Farage, of course, for the Reform Party, Natasha Osborne for Green, Greg Jamieson for the Climate Party, Tony Mack, an independent, Tassos Papanastasiou for the Heritage Party, and Andrew Pemberton for UKIP.
Goodness me, Emily, you're a lot better at reading those names out than I am. Let's get some analysis now with the political commentator Nathaniel Ogoniyi. Nathaniel, thanks for joining us. First of all, your impressions of what Nigel Farage was saying there. To some extent, it was quite an energetic performance.
Yeah, I can see why you'd say that. I think Nigel Farage is making the most of the Prime Minister being away at the G7 in Italy. But I do want to pick up on one of the things that Nigel Farage said about a vote for the Conservative Party, for Labour or for Reform. Over the last days, a lot of people have said a vote for Reform is a vote for Keir Starmer, and he picked up on that. I think it's interesting. You look at Richard Tice, who was on stage there, and he said he was happy that the Reform Party knocked the Conservative Party into second place in the West Midlands. You look at the Deputy Leader of Reform, he said he'd be happy with the Labour government. So I'm not sure Nigel Farage has sort of quite killed that story yet.
Well, he's spun it on its head, though, hasn't he, Nathaniel? He's taken something that's been thrown at him and the Reform Party, and he's thrown it straight back.
So I think he's tried to. He's tried to, but this is one poll of many, and you know we've got a while to go until the 5th of July. 3 weeks to go until the 5th of July. So you know, I think we've got a while to go yet.
I'm very interested in the style in which Nigel Farage came across, because perhaps this is one of the reasons why Reform is breaking through a little bit. Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak are so scripted. They're very sort of autonomous as politicians. They use their catchphrases and you pretty much know what they're going to say before they say it. Whereas Nigel Farage, he was asking a question about the Tories and at one point he just went, boring, boring, boring. I mean, when do you last hear a politician sounding a bit like a siren?
So yeah, I think boring is also his response to the general election at first. You may remember he put out the statement saying that he was off to campaign in the United States with Donald Trump. And so it's interesting now that he's come back and trying to start something here. I think he's taking lots of voters in the Red Wall for a ride, but I don't think he has their best interests at heart. I think he abandoned them at the start of the election campaign, and now that it looks like he might be able to generate a bit of interest here, he's come back for that. But I don't think he has those people's interests at heart.
Well, he did say the Reform Party are now well ahead of the Conservatives in the North East, North West, Yorkshire and the Humber, East Midlands, West Midlands, parts of the Eastern region. Do you think he's right to ask to be at these debates and to challenge Keir Starmer to a debate on immigration?
So I think he's preying on Starmer's weakness on immigration. That, I think, is clear for all to see. Obviously, the Conservatives put out the pledge to put in a legally binding migration cap. Labour have pledged to sort of rebadge existing officers into this border security command. But actually, I think the best debates are between the leader of the Conservative Party, Rishi Sunak, and with Keir Starmer, right? Because those are the only two people that can become Prime Minister come 5th of July.
No, really interesting stuff there. Just to finish up, I suppose, do you expect that these polls will continue in the direction they're going in? Will Nigel Farage continue to climb, or might he have a ceiling?
I think this is more of a blip. I think he's headed back on the way down. You look at what the Conservatives have come out with over the last week or so, and actually a lot of that, I think, will go down very well with some of these people who've suggested they'd vote Reform in this poll. You look at national service, which is very popular with Reform voters. You look at things like the income, national insurance tax, cuts, which the Conservatives had announced. I think it's about £1,300 per person. So you look at things like that, and I think those will go down very well with Reform voters. I think we've probably seen about as much of Nigel Farage as we should.
All right. Well, Nathaniel Ganiyu, thank you very much indeed for coming on the show. Great to get your perspective on this.
Now, the Labour Party continue on the campaign trail, of course. Today, they're focusing on getting people back to work with specialist mental health hubs. It's as they're facing questions surrounding their spending pledges in their manifesto.
Well, joining us now is Labour's Deputy National Campaign Coordinator, Ellie Reeves. Ellie, thank you very much for joining us on the show. We've just had this big press conference from Nigel Farage. Are you worried that he might take votes from the Labour Party in some of those seats, particularly up north?
Look, we're not complacent about any votes at the election. We're working hard, speaking to voters, getting across our positive message for change. That's what we are concentrating on, rather than focusing on reform. We want to be speaking to voters.
Now let's get to what you've promised to do, the taxes you've promised to raise, but also the things you haven't promised to spend money on. Am I right in saying that there is no accounting in your manifesto for any settlement with the junior doctors, the potential billions that might be spent on that?
Well, everything in our manifesto is fully costed and fully funded, unlike the Conservative manifesto.
But you haven't mentioned the junior doctors.
It's incredibly... look, everything that we've done is fully costed and fully funded. Unlike the government, we would get round the table.
Sorry, just to press this point, I know there's a bit of a delay on the line, so I apologise for that. But just to press this point, the junior doctors, you say you'll get round the table, you'll reach a settlement with them. You haven't set aside any money in your manifesto for that settlement. So surely that means if you want a fully costed, fully funded way to settle that dispute, to stop there being strikes, we can expect more tax rises.
We have made absolutely clear that there will be no raises to income tax, national insurance or VAT. Everything that we've done is fully costed and fully funded, including an immediate injection of cash into our NHS, putting 40,000 more appointments and procedures on each week, paid for by clamping down on tax avoidance and properly ending non-dom status. So if you live here and work here, you should also pay your taxes here. The NHS is on its knees after 14 years of the Conservatives, which is why we have got a plan to get it back on its feet.
Yeah. Ellie Reeves, we've heard from the Conservatives today. They're saying you need to come clean on 18 potential tax rises that you haven't ruled out. But it's not just the Conservatives saying this, it's also the Institute for Fiscal Studies. They're very worried that some of your various pledges, there's not the spending to back it up. They're saying this is going to come from taxes or it's going to come from borrowing. Do you need to come clean on where you're going to fund all of these pledges?
No, and we've made clear that we won't be raising income tax, national insurance or VAT. We've set out in our manifesto some very specific things that we would do on tax to put that money immediately back into
Yes, but Ellie Reeves, there's a huge amount of uncertainty. There's a huge amount of uncertainty about how those tax rises that you have mentioned are going to fund. How much money is actually going to be put into the public purse from clamping down on non-doms, from the VAT on private fees. There are so many different analyses of these policies that show that number could be drastically different. So essentially the people want to know what other tax rises might we see down the line if people vote for a Labour government?
Everything in the manifesto is fully costed. There's £8.5 billion that we can put into our public services, and we set out how we do that. But the majority of that comes from clamping down on tax avoidance. That's not a tax rise. That's making sure that people are paying the tax that they should be paying. So that is fully set out in the manifesto, as well as ending those tax breaks for private schools, putting that into our state schools with recruiting those 6,500. 100 extra teachers, bringing in 3,000 new
Ellie Reeves, there's
nurseries and
so
free
much
breakfast clubs in every
uncertainty.
primary school. But the costings are set out.
There's so much uncertainty, though, isn't there, about how parents are going to react to the VAT on private school fees. There's so much uncertainty over how energy firms will react to yet another windfall tax on their profits. There are so many uncertainties. I don't think you can come and say it's absolutely costed what's in our manifesto.
Well, it is fully costed and it is fully funded. And we've been clear that economic stability is at the heart of everything that we would do. Look, under the Conservatives, people are facing the highest tax burden in 70 years. They crashed the economy with Liz Truss's mini budget, leaving people paying hundreds of pounds more each month in their mortgage. And, you know, they just want to continue in that same cycle. You know, they've promised another unfunded national insurance reduction, but aren't able to say where the money is going to come from that. In contrast, everything that we've done, we've set out how we would pay for it, whether it's the windfall tax on the oil and gas giants, ending tax breaks for private schools, ending the loopholes on non-dom, and importantly, clamping down on tax avoidance. So people pay the tax that they ought to. That money's going back into our public services.
If we're to take your sums at face value, that means that you'll be freezing those tax thresholds through to 2028. That means more people dragged into higher tax bands. That is a tax rise on working people. It means, according to your own sums, that the percentage of GDP taken in tax will be the highest in history. And according to your sums, you'll be sticking to Jeremy Hunt's cuts for budgets going into the next fiscal year. So that means there'll be 20 billion in cuts, as well as frozen tax thresholds, tax rises on working people. That's not saying anything that isn't in your manifesto. That is your manifesto.
We have made clear that we're not rising income tax, VAT or national insurance. We've also got a plan for growth across the economy. That's how people end up feeling better off, by growing the economy. That's why we've got an industrial strategy. We'll invest using our national wealth funds. We'll set up GB Energy to bring down energy bills, create good jobs across the economy. We've announced today that we will bring in 8,500 new mental health workers. Far too many people are unable to work because of mental ill health. We want to change that. We want to get people the help and support that they need so that they can get to work and live fulfilling lives. That's the difference that we will make, because growth has flatlined in this country under the Conservatives. Our manifesto is a growth manifesto. We're going to grow the economy and people will feel better off than they will do after the last 14 years of Conservative failure.
OK, well, thank you very much indeed. Ellie Reeves, Labour's Deputy National Campaign Coordinator. Thank you very much indeed for your time this afternoon. Thank you. Those little children playing behind the camera there. A little bit off-putting.
No, it's nice. It's nice. As,
oh, you're much nicer than me.
Victoria Tower Gardens is awash with picnicking, especially this time of year.
I think there's going to need to be quite a bit of economic growth.
Right, because here's the thing. And it's no... When we spoke about... Will you raise this tax? Will you raise that tax? They're just going back to the three taxes they say they won't raise apart from the threshold.
That's all Rachel Reeves has said, isn't it?
But then there's all these other taxes. There's the banding for council tax. There's taxes on investments. There's stocks and shares, capital gains tax, taxes on pensions, all sorts of taxes.
But people think, oh, capital gains tax, that won't affect me. All of these taxes end up affecting everyone. Anyway, it is Trooping of the Colour tomorrow. And joining us now is the former editor of The Horse and Hound, Lucy Higginson. Lucy, thank you very much indeed. Now, I was reading how the bolted horse, the one that bolted from that military practice, is going to be at the Trooping of the Colour.
That's right. I think 3 that were involved in that incident are taking part tomorrow. 2 of them, who were the most sort of severely injured then, are recovering at a charity that does a lot of great work in the equestrian sector called the Horse Trust in Buckinghamshire, enjoying some grazing, or Dr. Green, as we call it in the horse world, including the grey pictured there, I believe. But yeah, 3 of them are going to be at Trooping the Colour tomorrow, apparently, which is excellent news, back doing what they know and love. And those are the 2 recovering at the Horse Trust, having out.
That is a heartwarming story, but I'm sure many people will be slightly worried about this. Are these horses safe? It seems quite soon that that two of these horses will be back at the Trooping of the Colour. Will we not sort of be presenting perhaps a risk to the public by reintroducing these horses so quickly?
No, they will have been really carefully assessed. The Army, the Household Division, has really excellent horsemen. It has riding masters, it has vets, it has some of the best farriers in the country. They really do know their stuff, and they will have checked that the horses are feeling well and safe, and they'll have been out on watering order, they'll have been out on morning exercise near traffic to check they're okay. And the two most severely injured may take more rehabilitation, perhaps, until they're ready to do that, if they're ready to do that. But it's a bit like, you know, if you have, unlucky enough to have a prang in your car, very few people say, that's it, I'm not going to drive forever. You know, horses are working animals. Most of them really thrive on having routine and a job, something to do. So they're
resilient. I love the names of these horses. Tennyson, Trojan and Vanquish. Fantastic names.
They often have names with military associations. So you often get names like Tobruk, named after specific battles. And interestingly, their names start with the letter of the alphabet that denotes what year they were born. So a horse beginning with Q is going to be a bit younger, 2 years younger than a horse whose name begins with T. So that's quite an easy ready reckoner for working out how old the horse is that you're about to get on in the Army.
Well, you learn something new every day. Thank you very much, Lucy. Lucy Higginson, former editor of The Horse and Hound, thank you very much for taking the time out to speak to us.
Though we are not now that great and noble power that once moved earth and heaven, that which we are, we are. Sorry, when you said Tennyson, I've just got to do some Tennyson. Anyway, lots of people have been getting in touch, but we'll get to some of those views. Do we have time for one? We might have time for just one.
OK, yeah, go on then. Let's do a little view, if we can get to our views again. We're going to... hopefully they'll help us out behind.
Do you know what? We'll save it. We'll save it for the next hour. That's something for everyone to look forward to, but also much more to come, including our spicy debate. It was delayed because of Nigel Farage's announcement, but we'll be coming to that and much, much more after your adverts.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest Met Office weather forecast for GB News. Heavy showers dominating the country's weather over the next few days. Gusty winds, some sunny spells in between the downpours. They'll be in short supply because low pressure is firmly positioned to the west of Scotland. It's going to become slow moving over the next few days, and it's going to continue to drive heavy downpours in from the southwest with a gusty wind as well. That's going to be particularly noticeable for the southwest of England and northern Scotland. Northern Scotland subject to more persistent rain overnight, tending to ease later on. Another band of more persistent rain moves into Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, with some clearer and drier spells further east across England and central and southern Scotland. However, temperatures are not falling as far as previous nights because we've lost that cold Arctic wind. We've replaced it with low pressure and unsettled weather, so it's not going to be a pleasant start to the weekend. There'll be further heavy showers or longer spells of rain. The wettest weather there for Saturday morning across North Wales, parts of Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland. Some sunshine, though, for central belts into the Grampians, the Highlands, Western Isles, the far north of Scotland, Shetland in particular. A lot of cloud and outbreaks of rain. So very mixed conditions across the country on Saturday morning, and things don't really improve into the afternoon with further showers building, and just about anywhere could see a heavy downpour, even a thunderstorm developing into the afternoon. A gusty wind continues across the south and southwest. Meanwhile, those showers will be interspersed by some sunny spells, but it's not going to feel particularly warm in the sunshine. Highs of 17 or 18 Celsius. Now, for Saturday evening, we'll see further showers rotating around the area of low pressure, which by this stage is centred just off the east of Scotland. And into Monday and Tuesday, that low tends to fill and move away, so fewer showers, a better chance of some sunshine.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're making this summer funner. with 3 incredible prizes to be won. First, a fantastic £15,000 in tax-free cash that you can spend on anything you like. Next, there's the latest iPhone 15 with a brand new set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at the UK attraction of your choice. The summer fun could be on us. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do. His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, and unlike you. That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frothy in here, isn't it?
You'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice. Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said Stump. You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere. Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Friday, the 14th of June. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Emily Carver.
There's momentum behind Reform UK. The words of Nigel Farage as he addressed a central London press briefing today, alongside his chairman, Richard Tice.
Labour tax attack. The Tories come out all guns blazing on what they describe as Labour's 18 tax rises, from parents' tax to pensions tax to family home tax. Who's right when it comes to tax?
And as the Euros 2024 kick off tonight in Germany, why do we have pride flags adorning the capital's Regent Street instead of St George's flags? Well, we'll be debating this issue shortly.
Yes, I get it's Pride Month, and personally I think maybe a month is a little bit too much. Okay, you know, it used to be Pride Day, didn't it?
No, it's always been. It depends how many parties you go to, really. I mean, you've got to go around the world to various different parades, and they can't all be on the same day because they've all got the same people going to them. So you've got to go from Manchester to Brighton to London to New York. You know, you've got to do it all.
But this is the summer of epic sports. England going into battle in the Euros. Surely. We should be switching that flag up for the St George's flag.
Or we could alternate them. Is that a centrist solution?
Perhaps. What you don't do is change the St George's flag into a multicoloured version. No. We've seen that before. We saw the hoo-ha, we saw the upset and the controversy that what happened with the football kit. Don't need that again. Don't need that again.
Is there an argument here that this is Regent Street we're looking at here? This is the capital not just of England, but of the United Kingdom. And at this stage in the game, actually tonight, it's Scotland playing, not England.
Scotland.
I mean, isn't there a bit of a... There's always been an awkward stage for London, because London is supposed to be the capital of this country of countries, not just one country within the country.
Hang on then. Get this. Very controversial solution. The Union flag.
Wow, that would be good.
The Union flag. OK, well, we're going to be having
What about a multicoloured Union flag?
My blood pressure, Tom. My blood pressure. gbnews.com/your say. Please do get in touch. And also, was Nigel Farage right to demand to be at that BBC debate? Let us know. gbnews.com/your say. But first, the headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 2. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your top story this hour, Nigel Farage says Reform UK is now the opposition after a poll put them 1% ahead of the Conservatives. YouGov says the close result represents a seismic shift in the voting landscape, but they also caution that Britain's voting system means Reform may still struggle to pick up any seats. Labour is still well ahead on 37%, down 1 point, while the Liberal Democrats also lost a point, scoring 14%, with the Greens on 7 points. Speaking a short while ago, Mr Farage said his party could change the dynamic on election day.
They're still pumping out the same line, that if you vote for Reform, you will get Labour. But the inflection point means that actually, if you vote Conservative in the red wall, you will almost certainly get Labour. A Conservative vote in the red wall is now a wasted vote. We are the challengers to Labour. We are now the real opposition.
And responding to the latest poll, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Laura Trott, said a vote for Reform risks putting Labour in charge, which would mean higher taxes.
We know on their own figures that their manifesto would take the tax burden to a record high. But the truth is much worse. On top of that, we know the £38.5 billion black hole in Labour's unfunded promises mean taxes will go up by an extra £2,094 for every working family in our country. So, we know the size of the bill, but not how they plan to pay for it.
Meanwhile, specialist mental health hubs would be set up under a plan by Labour to help get people back to work. It would see an extra 8,500 new staff recruited to boost access to mental health support. Depression and anxiety are among the most common conditions that force people out of work, while an estimated 1.2 million people are currently waiting for mental health treatment. Shadow Health Secretary Wes Streeting says getting the economy back on track will mean more money for healthcare.
Labour's manifesto is a fully costed, fully funded manifesto with promises that we can keep and promises the country can afford. We've got to get our economy back to growth. While we do that, we've spelled out specific measures that we will take in our manifesto and how we will pay for them, making fairer choices than the Conservatives. We don't want to see the burden of taxation rise. We can't tax and spend our way out of this crisis. In the economy, we've got to grow our way out of the crisis.
Backing British farmers will be central to a plan set to be unveiled by the Liberal Democrats later. The party's deputy leader, Daisy Cooper, will be on the campaign trail in the east of England, promoting her party's national food strategy. It would include financial help for farmers who are coping with expensive energy and production costs. The party says the strategy also tackles rising prices on supermarket shelves, ending food poverty and ensuring better food security. In other news, NATO is to have more control over the coordination of weapons for Ukraine in an effort to safeguard supplies in the event of a second Donald Trump presidency. The US and Ukrainian presidents signed a 10-year security agreement at the G7 summit last night, inching it closer towards membership of the alliance. It aims to guarantee support for Ukraine's war against Russia's invasion. Mr. Trump has been a strong critic of the NATO alliance, even saying he would encourage Russia to attack any member that fails to pay its bills. Leading pub groups and breweries have written to three main political parties demanding an immediate cut in duties on beer. The letter appears in today's edition of The Times, coinciding with the start of the Euros. They say British drinkers pay 54% of duty per pint, compared to German or Spanish beer lovers who pay less than 5p. They're calling for an urgent radical reform of business rates to bring the UK in line with the European average. And as Britain waits for grey skies to clear, Greece is sweltering through its earliest ever heatwave. Tourist sites have been forced to close and elderly people are taking refuge at special cooling centres as temperatures in some areas push past 43 degrees. The Deputy Mayor in Athens says emergency services are keeping watch for anyone experiencing difficulty. Experts say Greece has been severely impacted by climate change in the recent years, with rising temperatures fueling deadly fires and erratic weather conditions. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to...
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 2. Now, a confident Nigel Farage insists Reform UK is the real opposition after they've overtaken the Tories in the latest YouGov poll.
Yes, he says they'll soon release their policies in a contract to the British people, which will include a radical plan to hold the government to account.
The party's leader is also demanding the BBC invite him to a four-way leaders' debate alongside the Tories, Labour, the Lib Dems as well.
Well, joining me now is Christopher Hope, GB News political editor, who joins us from the Reform UK press conference. Christopher, he is very much demanding that the BBC get him involved, allow him to take part in this debate. Do you think he'll win this one?
He's in a constant battle, Nigel Farage, isn't he, against what he calls the establishment, the elite. He's just been writing to the head of the polling council, demanding that when big polling companies poll, they strip out Reform UK's name rather than other parties on a different tab to ensure that those who want to support Reform UK get a chance to tell pollsters about it. He's won that battle. His next one is with establishment broadcasters. Why should it be that the BBC arranged an interview between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer when he is now in second place according to one poll by YouGov overnight? So you can see how he's trying to get this battle, this fight against the establishment. He told us just now he might win as many as more than 6 million votes. That's nearly twice as many as he won in 2015. But I asked him a question I think on many people's lips. I raised it with you guys 2 hours ago, that what happens if you win loads of votes, you come second with a popular vote, but you get just 2 or 3 MPs. What then? Here's what he had to say.
This election is our first step towards building for 2029. So however many seats we win, you have my absolute assurance that our campaigning for the 29 election, our building of a big movement in this country, will begin the very next day, on July the 5th. If we did finish up with a huge number of votes and a paltry number of seats, do you know what it would do? It would tell us, yet again, that Britain is broken and Britain needs reform. And that reform includes the electoral system, that reform includes the abomination that is the House of Lords, and that reform includes the right, as people in Switzerland have, to call referendums on key issues if they think their government and parliament are out of touch with them. Thank you.
Nigel Farage there answering a question we put to him about this democratic deficit. If he wins all these MPs and gets 0 or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, maximum of 4 MPs, as David Bull, who's the co-deputy leader of the Reform UK party, told us last night. He also didn't answer the question, would you join the Tory party if you become an MP? He did say there are as many as 50 Tory MPs he thinks who are aligned with reform, and clearly this is the beginning of a 6-year programme, he said, to try and form the main right-wing opposition for the next election in 2029.
It is absolutely fascinating to think ahead to what could actually happen in this Parliament, because are we all getting ahead of ourselves? How much does voter share actually matter? I think back to 1983, when the SDP came within a gnat's crotchet of the Labour Party vote share. In the polls leading up to that election, they were over and ahead of Labour, but they came within almost 1% of Labour in 1983. But by 1990, they dissolved.
Well, it could be the case, couldn't it? I mean, and also, what does Nigel Farage do? Again, we are speculating. 3 weeks away today, we'll know the result, but we are speculating completely. But he may face his own Donald Trump moment. What does he do? He can't challenge the result. Does he accept it and campaign on electoral reform? You know, he's a patriot, a Democrat. He believes in democracy. But if that system means he gets 2 or 3 MPs, and the Tory party is third, and they get 20 times, 30 times the number he gets, it does raise question marks about the whole the democratic process in this country, and whether that might fuel the idea of proportional representation, which, by the way, a Labour government with a huge majority will not want to do. So I think it does pose all sorts of questions. But right now, he is ready for a real assault, I think, from the establishment parties over the final 20 days before polling day. From Labour last night, they started doing attack tweets on X about Nigel Farage. The Tories, they know their enemy, Nigel Farage. Will there be a complete pile-on, I think, on him personally, on his party? He's got a weekend trying to raise money. He thinks he can raise £2.5 million from £25 donations. He needs more than that to try and make this happen. He also has a problem. He has no idea where voters live. Now, the Lib Dems do well, and also the establishment parties do well. They know where their voters are. Voters don't move around that much over years. They stay in their homes. They've got their databases. They know that's Lib Dem voter, that's a Tory one. Nigel Farage has no idea where anyone is. So he can be very big on social media. He can be big on GB News, and he can make a big noise nationally. But where do the voters live, and can you get them out? That's a question he knows he can't answer, and that's why they'll only win a few MPs at the election.
That's a very interesting point. Thank you so much, Christopher Hope, GB News political editor. Good stuff.
Well, delighted to be joined now by the Conservative peer, Lord Howard, of course, former leader of the Conservative Party. And Lord Howard, I want to just continue that question that we were talking to Christopher Hope about the disproportionality of our electoral system. Because, of course, when you took the Conservative Party into the 2005 election, Tony Blair won a big majority on just 35% of the vote. Indeed, your Conservative Party beat the Labour Party in England on vote share, but lost on seat share.
Thank you for reminding me about that. But the fact is that that's the electoral system we have. I think it's the best electoral system. If you look at various other kinds of systems, like the ones they have in many continental countries, it's very difficult to get real change. You have all these coalitions in European countries as a result of proportional representation, and all that happens after each election is that the balance in each coalition may change a little bit. You might find one party has a few more seats in the cabinet and one party has a few fewer seats, but nothing much changes. So our system, I think, is the best system. And we did. Nigel Farage is very keen on referendums. Well, we had a referendum on a proportional representation system just a few years ago, during the years of the coalition between the Lib Dems and the Conservatives, and the country rejected it, and rejected it quite rightly, in my opinion.
Lord Howard, it looks likely, if we believe the polling, that the Conservatives may well have thrown away, essentially, their stonking majority. What do you put that down to?
Well, I don't think you should pay too much attention to the polls. Polls have been proved to be wrong very many times in the past. But what you've asked me is a really serious question, and I think the answer is this. We as a country have been through really difficult times. We've had the pandemic. We have a war on the continent of Europe. That has led to a spike in energy prices and inflation. These things are more difficult than anything I had to deal with all those years ago when I was in government with Margaret Thatcher and John Major. And these things have meant that we're not where we would like to be as a country. We're not as rich as we would like to be, although we've outgrown many of our European competitors, but we're not where we would like to be. And people aren't where they would like to be in their own lives.
But what about immigration,
It's natural in those circumstances for people to blame the government. But in fact, the government, I think, has done a really good job in steering us through those crises and overcoming them.
I think a lot of people have sympathy for that. We have gone through many crises. But what about the immigration question? Because that is something that a lot of the electorate can no longer trust the Conservatives on. How many times have the Conservatives broken the promise to reduce immigration levels? It's almost as if they say, yes, 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 we're going to bring it down, and then it goes up, up, up. That is a huge loss in trust.
Well, I agree that it's far too high. It's grown in the last 2 or 3 years, largely because we've taken in a lot of people from places like Ukraine and Hong Kong. And that's not going to happen every year. That was a one-off thing. Now, if you look more recently at the figures, they started to come down last year. The government have put in place policies which are estimated to bring them down by half next year. And in the Conservative manifesto, there is a clear plan for Parliament to vote every year on the limit of immigration, and that will help to bring it down even further. In fact, there's a commitment to bring it down year on year. So I agree that it's been far too high. There are specific reasons for that. And what you can see is the government taking action to bring it down, with further action promised in the manifesto.
Now, of course, you're a member of the House of Lords, one of the many esteemed former members of the House of Commons who've moved from the lower chamber to the upper chamber.
You're very kind, Tom.
If we're to believe the polls and the Labour Party is to win the next election, there's going to be changes to how the upper house works. People who, once they reach the age of 80, will be forced to retire. And that's only the start of a number of the changes that are going to be brought in. What's your view on how that will change how our bicameral legislature works?
Well, I'm one of the over 80s, so I'll be out if they win. It wouldn't particularly bother me personally, but it would deprive the House of Lords for a large number of people who play a very important part in scrutinising legislation. Now, that's something the House of Commons used to do, but it doesn't do anymore. It's only the House of Lords that actually scrutinises legislation, and it does it in detail and it does it well. Now, it may be that the incoming Labour government, if there is one, don't want to have their legislation scrutinised carefully. Maybe they want an easy ride in the House of Lords. And if that's what they want, then removing everybody over 80 will be a good start for them. But it'd be very bad for the country, because it's very important that legislation is scrutinised carefully and rigorously.
And Lord Howard, just to finish, lots of warnings about a supermajority, a one-party socialist state from some senior figures in the Conservative Party. What are you most worried about when it comes to a Labour government, if there is one?
I'm most worried about the blank cheque that it will give them to raise taxes. Even The Guardian has said that Rachel Reeves is going to announce 10 to 12 new tax increases in September. And I'm very worried about their so-called workers' rights package, which is going to give the trade unions more power to strike, make it easier for them to go on strike, and make it more difficult for firms to run their businesses. Now, if you do that, there's zero prospect of economic growth, because economic growth depends on the private sector, which creates the wealth and creates the growth. And if you make it more difficult for the private sector to operate, you're not going to get economic growth.
Well, Lord Howard, Michael Howard, real pleasure to talk to you. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you both.
It is so fascinating that the House of Lords is getting younger in some ways. and some of the people who have knowledge and experience from serving in Margaret Thatcher's cabinet and John Major's cabinet and having that wealth of experience, they're going to be shown the door, and instead we're going to get 30-somethings who used to be a special advisor. Perhaps you're going to get people...
That would be a disgrace. That would be a disgrace. I don't know what it is about me personally, but I think it's just so important to have older people making decisions as well as young. That, you know, the experience, as you say, the knowledge.
The word for Senate, and the upper house in the United States and many other countries called a Senate rather than House of Lords, obviously, comes from old. Old man is the Latin root of Senate.
I don't think you should boot them out just because they've turned 80.
Yeah.
Hey, let us know what you think. Up next, the much-debated issue of flags resurfaces. Regent Street in London is draped in pride flags over the St George's flag during the Euros football tournament. Should they be replaced for this event? We'll debate that shortly.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Recent polling suggests dentistry has become the hardest NHS service for patients to access, within NHS treatments still 15% lower than pre-pandemic levels. So a YouGov survey reveals that more than 70% of Brits describe seeing the dentist as difficult, compared with 64% for GPs and 42% for A&E services. One British man, get this, he even took to flying 10,000 miles for dental care, saying the extra time and money spent was far less hassle than trying to get an appointment on the NHS. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs. And a shocking 1/5 of UK adults have also admitted to trying DIY dentistry, including the old trick of tying string around a wobbly tooth and slamming it in the door so it comes out. So, should people be more careful when taking their teeth into their own hands?
That is one of the problems. Obviously, population growth makes it much more difficult for people to access NHS services, but they need to then catch up on the other side with dental services and increase the amount of dentists and access to dentistry, and especially NHS dentistry, obviously.
What's the cut-off age for free dentistry on the NHS?
So it is 18 years old, but there are exemptions around maternity, pregnancy. There's some free care around pregnancy.
We saw some data a few weeks back about the number one cause for child admission into A&E is tooth decay. I mean, that was shocking when I read it.
It's really bad, and what happens is people, kids with multiple decayed teeth, they basically have to be put under general anaesthetic, and then all those rotted teeth have to be extracted under general anaesthetic. Like, if those baby teeth start going crooked, then the adult teeth start going crooked as well. Right. So it is important to look after the baby teeth. It's really important. I think they should make it more central to their policies, definitely.
The People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This Saturday, GB News invites you to witness the pageantry, the tradition and the unity. Join Ellie Costello and me, Andrew Pearce, in a celebration of His Majesty the King's official birthday. Trooping the Colour, Saturday at 10 a.m. on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 25 minutes past 2, and now on to this much-debated issue of flags.
Yes, the former Top Gear presenter James May tweeted about there being too many pride flags on Regent Street. He wrote, "Pride, while I have observed and admired what you have achieved over my lifetime, may I respectfully suggest that you are borderline guilty of too much bunting. It may be seen as authoritarian and therefore oppressive."
Too much bunting. TMB.
It's a lot of bunting.
Well, as the Euros kick off tonight, should central landmarks of the capital city be adorned instead?
Or any other city.
With the St George's flag instead of the Pride flag. Let's have that debate.
Yes, to discuss this, we're joined now by political commentator and broadcaster Christine Hamilton and the discrimination lawyer Robin Moira-White. Christine, is it a case of too much bunting or the wrong bunting?
Well, there seems to be some confusion. As I understand it, the photograph that James May actually tweeted is an old photograph from a couple of years ago when it was Pride's, I think, 50th anniversary, and that was their excuse. But I haven't been to Regent Street. I don't know what it's looking like at the moment, but it would be nice if there was St George's flags. But, you know, you can't change the flags every day, etc.
They are still there, Christine. They are still there for Pride Month.
They are still there, fine. They are still there. But I think, you know, James May is somebody I really take much cognizance of. I don't mind about calves or anything like that. I think it was slightly tongue-in-cheek, but I think it was very unfortunate that he says he didn't, but he did make some sort of reference to the origins of World War II, which I think was a bit unfortunate, and I think that's probably why he's had so much pour down on him, like a ton of bricks. But yes, I would like to have seen some Union flags on D-Day, for example. Why didn't we celebrate that? And yes, why not? I'm not particularly into football either, but yeah, let's support our home team.
Well, let's throw that over to Robin Moira-White. Robin, there are some people who will say that actually, for a whole month, one of the sort of premier streets of the capital, I mean, it does seem that perhaps there are sort of other events that get shrouded out.
Well, you know, I used to be sceptical about things like flags, and I have a strong working connection with our railway network, and there came a moment when Southeastern put what they call a train bow, i.e. a version of a pride flag across the front and end of one of their trains that runs around the southeast. And the positive reaction from the LGBT staff of Southeastern had to be seen to be believed, just with something so, in some ways so trivial, but showing that they were valued.
Robin, if someone started grumbling about it and saying, oh, I don't know why that train needs a rainbow flag on it and all of that, would you think that they were, I don't know, showing bigotry?
Let's not jump to calling people bigots. Let's jump to the fact that my local pub, when England is playing, does indeed fly, you know, the St George's flag and celebrates Englishness. Let's celebrate the diversity of our country in different ways, and let's be pleased to do that.
Christine, just throw it back to you. Of course, James May has taken a bit of flack for this tweet. He used a 2-year-old photograph. He could have, of course, taken a photograph just yesterday or indeed today and done the same tweet. But why do you think he felt compelled to tweet this?
I've no idea. I mean, obviously taking an up-to-date photograph would have been TME, too much effort for him. So he used an old photograph. He needs to check his facts. But you mentioned with Robin, why is it a month? Why is it a month? Why do we have Gay Pride Month? We have their special day on, I think it's the 29th of March, when they have, no, not the 29th of March, 29th of June, sorry, when they have the Pride and the celebrations and the march and everything. But why a whole month? We don't have Mother's Month. We don't have Armed Forces Month. Why do we have to have a month? And it seems to me that LGB, etc., of course they deserve equal rights, and it's been a long and hard battle to get them. But what I object to, and what I think a lot of people object to, is special treatment. Yes, equal rights. And there cannot be many people in this country nowadays who don't have amongst their friends gay, etc., etc. I mean, they really can't. And my understanding is that a lot of gay people object to all this over-promotion, and the idea that if you object to it, you are regarded as homophobic, etc., etc. I'm not remotely homophobic, but I just think enough is enough, and I think that spread of flags, if they're going to be up there for a month, is frankly special treatment. It's ludicrous, but I presume it's Sadiq Khan's doing.
I mean, Robin, has this all gone a bit too far? I mean, you've got, you know, banks and hedge funds and supermarkets all emblazoning their brand logo with the Pride or the Progress flag. Is it all a bit sort of virtue signally, particularly when the corporates get on board?
No, I don't think it is. I think it shows the value of staff, as Christina said, who have had to fight very hard to be treated equally. And I'm afraid some people still need to be reminded to treat people equally. And the changing of logo colours for a period, and it tends to be for the month, for Pride Month, is something that shows that piece of value. People value it. They see it comes round each year, and their value is marked. And quite right, have months to celebrate other characteristics, other things in society, have other events. I was certainly out.
It's only 12 months, though, Robin.
Well, you mentioned D-Day at the start. Part of my family history is fighting across Northwest Europe. I had a grandfather who was particularly involved in that. And at the moment, I'm daily on what I still call Twitter. I am putting out the history of his trip across Northwest Europe and celebrating that. And I'll be doing that until next May. So everything has their time.
OK, well, getting back to Christine, just a quick one, just to finish. I mean, it is. Some people would say, you know, the only flag we need in our capital city should be the Union flag.
Well, that's the only flag we need, as what you might call a basic flag, but then we can have different flags. You mentioned the Euros. We can have a different flag for different events, but for a whole month. The other thing I have to say I object to is this purloining of the rainbow. I used a rainbow emoji on a tweet the other day. I think we just had our wedding anniversary, and I put a heart and a rainbow emoji. It was all ridiculously lovely, and I got criticised for that. And I said, excuse me, but the rainbow is a much-loved natural phenomenon which belongs to all of us, and it shouldn't be hijacked by one particular group in society.
Well, Christine, there was a time when you couldn't draw a rainbow without thinking that it was in favour of the NHS. It was this train, an NHS train or an LGBT train. It was quite hard to discern.
That's a funny point, Christine. Thank you so much, Christine Hamilton and Robin Moira-White. Great to speak to you both on this.
Yeah. Well, it must be said that
That's true, actually. Yes,
sometimes these logos are a bit of a controversial thing when it's weapons manufacturers that put on their. I know that Axon and Raytheon Technologies, BAE Systems have all gotten rainbow logos, and sometimes people in the LGBT community then go, hang on, what on earth are you doing?
Oh, for goodness sake. Coming up, we'll be dissecting a quite bizarre tweet from Emily Maitlis concerning crime in El Salvador. Stay tuned.
It's 2:34. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. Your headlines. Nigel Farage says Reform UK is now the opposition after a poll put them 1% ahead of the Conservatives. YouGov says the close result represents a seismic shift in the voting landscape, but they also caution that Britain's voting system means Reform may still struggle to pick up any seats. Labour is still well ahead on 37%, down 1 point, while the Liberal Democrats also lost a point, scoring 14%, with the Greens on 7 points. Speaking this afternoon, Mr Farage said his party could change the dynamic on election day.
They're still pumping out the same line, that if you vote for Reform, you will get Labour. But the inflection point means that actually, if you vote Conservative in the red wall, you will almost certainly get Labour. A Conservative vote in the red wall is now a wasted vote. We are the challengers to Labour. We are now the real opposition.
Specialist mental health hubs would be set up under a plan by Labour to help get people back to work, with an extra 8,500 new staff. Depression and anxiety are among the most common conditions that force people out of work, while an estimated 1.2 million people are currently waiting for mental health treatment. And leading pub groups and breweries have written to 3 main political parties demanding an immediate cut in duties on beer. The letter appears in today's edition of The Times, coinciding with the start of the Euros. They say British drinkers pay 54% of duty per pint, compared to German or Spanish beer lovers who pay less than 5p. They're calling for an urgent radical reform of business rates to bring the UK in line with the European average. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2691 and 1.1872 euros. The price of gold is £1,839 and 61 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 8,159 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Low pressure firmly in charge today and over the next few days. Blustery showers, some brighter spells in between the downpours, but it is staying unsettled with low pressure sitting to the west of Scotland and various showery bands of rain sweeping around that low, combined with a gusty wind, that wind particularly notable around the southwest coast and the far north of Scotland, where there'll be some bands of more persistent rain at times. Otherwise, the downpours will be moving through and there'll be some brighter weather in between. And temperatures not as low as they have been, with those values returning closer to average, although not feeling particularly pleasant because of the frequent downpours and the gusty wind. So around the coast of Devon and Cornwall, 12 or 13 Celsius, frequent showers moving through. Brighter spells for a time later in the day for northern England, North Wales, so it's not a complete washout, but those showers really getting going across parts of Northern Ireland. And for central and northern Scotland in particular, we'll see more prolonged rain. So for some, it will rain for several hours. Others will see some decent drier spells as we end the day and go into the evening, but further wet weather sweeps through across the southwest into the early hours of Saturday. And again, we've got those persistent outbreaks of rain in the far north of Scotland. Otherwise, some clear spells about, but it's not going to be as cool overnight as it has been during recent nights because of the breeze and because we've got a slightly milder source of air compared with the northerlies that we saw earlier in the week. Nevertheless, low pressure in control on Saturday. Further showers, some thunderstorms and some more prolonged outbreaks of rain as well. A very blustery day and an unsettled weekend to come.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Hello again. Let's go to the West Midlands firstly, and still seeing some queues on the cameras heading south down the M6 towards Wolverhampton and Walsall Junction 10. There was a breakdown there, that's now cleared, but still patchy queues back to Cannock at Junction 11. Queues too for the M5 either side of Clevedon at Junction 20. There was a collision southbound, it's now on the hard shoulder, but still tailing back in patches towards Portishead at Junction 19. And slow for an earlier breakdown on the northbound M1 just after the Luton Airport spur out Junction 10. That's now clear, but of course it's in the roadwork, so it's queuing. And the Colchester bypass, the southbound A12, is still seeing delays from Junction 28 down towards the tollgate interchange at Junction 26. It's all due there to an earlier collision, which is in the process of clearing. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Right, it's 2:40, which means it's nearly 3 o'clock, and that's the time when Martin comes on. Martin Daubney, what's coming up?
OK, today, Nigel Farage throws down the gauntlet to the BBC, to Rishi Sunak, to Sir Keir Starmer, demanding live TV debates. And he's predicted 6 million votes could be up for grabs. I'm going to put those through some software with an electoral expert. You will not believe the reset political landscape that will entail if that happens. Plus, I've been diving into the Labour manifesto. There are some horror shows hidden in there. A war on the motorist that could cost £14,700 for every single household, and a devolution of power, a constitutional change which could block Brexit's happening again. Events like Brexit's more powers for mayors like Sadiq Khan and Andy Burnham. And finally, Is it coming home? Of course, the Euro kicks off tonight at 8 p.m. The Tartan Army facing Munich. 200,000 of the Tartan Army are there. They probably won't even remember the result. They're 225 to 1 outsiders, but England are favourites. We'll look ahead to that. All coming up 3 till 6.
Army.
200,000. I still can't quite believe that number. Astonishing stuff. Martin, we look forward to it. 3 p.m.
I heard somewhere it was 4% of Scots, but I think it might have been 4% of a particular age group of Scots.
Right.
But anyway, I'll be supporting Scotland.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Until England arrive.
Until they play England, at which point, absolutely not. But how's this for a story? The former BBC star presenter Emily Maitlis tried to take a pop at Reform Party's crime and justice policies yesterday, but she's rather put her foot in it.
Yes, the presenter turned podcaster unveiled what she called her Reform UK or El Salvador government policy quiz.
Well, followers of Maitlis were asked to guess if the following policies were those of Reform UK or El Salvador. They included automatic life sentences for violent offenders,
helicopters and drones to be used by everyday police or forces,
police leaders replaced with military veterans,
no bail for people charged with organised crime,
automatic prison sentences for the possession of a knife.
In reality, we were just alternating there between reform policies and what El Salvador has done. Maitlis was clearly trying to make reform seem South American in its approach to crime and justice, but she might just have majorly stuck her foot in it.
Yes, El Salvador has in fact recently been declared one of the safest countries in America. By some measures, second only to Canada, thanks to pro-incarceration policies like the ones we were discussing, as well as a huge prison building programme. The homicide rate, as you can see on the screen, has collapsed from 103 per 100,000 to just 2.4 per 100,000. Now, by comparison, the United States, their homicide rate stands more than that, 6.4.
Now, since El Salvador started really cracking down on crime with its zero-tolerance approach, homicides fell by, get this, more than 97%.
Well, perhaps Emily Maitlis should have read up on El Salvador before her snarky tweet. Take it from the BBC's own reporting in February.
Until recently, the country had one of the world's highest murder rates, but under President Bukele, there has been a crackdown on crime and gangs, and El Salvador has been transformed from one of the most violent countries in the world to one of the safest in Latin America. Oops. So essentially what she ended up saying was that reform policies work when it comes to crime and punishment.
I think she was trying
was trying
to have a jab. She was trying to take the mick and actually ended up perhaps performing promotion. Very odd.
Well, make of that what you will. Coming up, as the Euros kick off tonight, we'll be heading live to Germany to hear from a sports journalist who's there in the thick of it.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
How can we have Britain's Got Talent? A British girl did win.
Yes.
This weekend.
Christmas, her name is.
Yes, Sydney Christmas.
Sydney Christmas.
She's a singer. I'm guessing she's going to have a Christmas single out.
She's a cruise ship singer and she works in a gym.
First woman to win in 9 years.
Yeah. I mean, I don't watch it anymore.
But some people clearly do. But apparently 5 of the last in the final were not British-born or even live here.
Outrageous.
I know. So why call it Britain's Got Talent?
I know.
It's bizarre, isn't it?
It sums up as well this difference between the British public and most people on the telly.
Yeah.
Because the judges do not notice this lack of British involvement in, or at least if they do notice it, they're not saying anything about it. But the viewers notice the imbalance, and just 4 of the foreign acts made it through to the final in the end. There was a patriotic protest in London on Saturdays, it was described. There was hundreds of thousands of people there. There were students against tyranny were there. There was Tommy Robinson was there, much maligned, divisive figure. But these people would say, we are feeling the need to walk on the streets of this country because we no longer feel we can assert our British identity.
Well, I mean, I think there's a difference between patriotism and xenophobia. And I think patriotism is great, and people like to feel a sense of identity, they feel a sense of belonging, you know, they understand what their flag is for, and they kind of, British values, which we all adhere to. And then there's xenophobia, which is sort of, we hate anyone who's not British. So I think I think that march that we saw at the weekend was actually quite patriotic. I don't think it was xenophobic at all. I think it was a nice sort of... They all seemed very kind of peaceful. And there wasn't any horrible rhetoric or anything like that. Certainly much less horrible rhetoric than we're used to seeing from the pro-Palestinian marches.
The People's Channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's election channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Just coming up to 10 to 3. Now, the Liberal Democrats are targeting the farming vote.
Yes, they're promising to boost the budget for the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs by £1 billion a year. They hope this will bring down food prices and help families suffering in the cost of living crisis.
Well, joining us now is the Welsh farmer, Gareth Wyn-Jones, friend of the show. Gareth, what do you make of what the Lib Dems are promising? Is it subsidies you're after?
Oh, just a fair price for what we're producing. Sad thing is the Liberals will never get in. They'll never have the power to do this. But as a farmer, we're frustrated because we don't hear anything about food security and the importance of what we do every day to feed the nation. None of that has been on any of these debates. And, you know, I think we've got to be careful, and people need to understand, you know, farming is a major part of what we've got in the UK, and feeding the nation in an affordable way has to be something that is looked at whoever goes into government next. And it's scary with some of the policies that are coming out from all sides, because look at any of these debates, farming, food production is never even spoken about. And, you know, you talk about immigration, you talk about the NHS, you talk about taxes, but you're going to need a farmer every single day of your life when you're on God's earth. And do import foods from all over the world. And we talk about the climate crisis and all the problems we've got, instead of making sure we're producing food environmentally friendly, you know, in a low carbon way in this beautiful country we've got. So these politicians and these big players should be getting behind agriculture, because we are one of the most important parts of everybody's life every single day.
Well, it certainly looks absolutely stunning behind you. Do you think sometimes farmers are demonised, almost?
Oh, you're dead right. We've been demonised by mainstream media for a long time, you know, and people are blaming us for anything and everything. But the time people will understand we're important when there isn't food on the supermarket shelves, you know, and when they can't afford it. Because we've seen what's happened with the rivers and pollution and how these water companies are being exposed. Well, if you go back 2 years ago, everybody was pointing the finger at farmers all the time, and it's frustrating. And we've had a very poor spring this year. A lot of crops have failed.
Yeah.
It's going to be a struggle. And if these politicians and whoever gets into power don't back agriculture, this country's going to go hungry. We are sleepwalking into food shortages. And it's not just in the UK. It's worldwide. Look at what's happened in the Netherlands. Look at what's happened in New Zealand. They're all trying to plant trees wherever they can and solar farms and, you know, take away good farming land out of food production. Biggest mistake they'll ever do.
Well, that's a strong case you make. Gareth Wyn-Jones, really great talking to you. Enjoy the rest of your day. Welsh farmer, of course.
Well, the Euros begin today as well, and Germany is the host, of course. They're playing Scotland in the opening match this evening.
Well, joining us now is sports journalist Ben Jacobs in Germany. Ben, the Tartan army are very much there.
They really are. It feels more like a Euros in Scotland, in Edinburgh and Glasgow, rather than necessarily here in Germany. A fantastic showing. And they won't just be in the stadiums either. They're all throughout the city centre making some noise. And that's what we like about the Euros. It's diverse, it's multicultural, and Scotland are going to have a real go. But they've got their work cut out on the football field, of course, against the host Germany, who do have a bit of an indifferent record in opening games at major tournaments of recent times. But clearly, Germany the favourites, and for Scotland, if they can get something from this game and get out the group in the longer term, it will be a very successful tournament for them.
A very successful tournament, some might say a miracle. But of course, the number we're hearing is 200,000. Is it really 200,000 Scots who have flown out for this game?
Well, it's certainly over 100,000. I've got to be honest with you, I'm not sitting there with a little ticker counter, but it feels overwhelming. And last night I was out in the town centre where there's various Bavarian eateries, and the Scottish fans were there early. They were respectful. They were tying flags to various landmarks. They're in their kilts. They're in their thousands. We'll have to kind of wait and see whether the home crowd can overwhelm them this evening. But one thing's for sure, we're not just going to see a Scottish base inside the stadium. They're there by the hotel. They're there in the town centre. They're making some noise, and they're making a case at the moment for being the best fans in Germany.
Well, looks like it. Thank you very much indeed, Ben Jacobs. You're a sports journalist in Germany for the kickoff of this tournament. Thank you very much indeed. Yes, Tom. A pub landlord hires £90,000 private jet to fly Scotland fans to Germany just for the Euros.
Incredible
what a man,
stuff. You know, this country and all the countries within it rely on pub landlords. Can't do anything without pub landlords. What great, great people they are. So he's hired a private jet.
Yeah, he said the plane quickly filled up all 150 spaces. The landlord said that he thinks he could have filled multiple planes. Well, yes, I imagine so. I mean, I'd be quick to try and get a ticket.
Do you think that people, because obviously these people won't have tickets to watch the actual game, to be inside the actual stadium, but I suppose just being there to say, I was there, I was in Germany when this happened, I suppose that's sort of part of the magic of it all.
Yes, I'm sure my Scottish family wish they were there. To soak up the atmosphere. Also, Munich. I lived in Munich for a few months, and there are a lot of beer gardens. Yes, there are a lot of places for those Scottish fans to sit down and have a pint, commiserate or celebrate, or just prepare.
Yeah, I'm still yet to go to Munich, but I'm determined to visit some of the beer halls. But there we go.
They'll be given shandy this time.
I've got a theory about this Euros tournament in the same context of the general election. If England do quite well, perhaps it might be a bit of a buoyant mood in the country. Will people stop feeling quite so miserable? I mean, we were expecting to get to the semi-finals or the quarter-finals just the day after the general election.
Oh, do you know what I think is making people feel extremely miserable is the weather. And I've been checking on it, and it is due to improve. So that's all I can say. We could be heading into the 20s very soon, so that'll be rather nice. We're going to see you on Monday, though.
Absolutely, so have a fantastic weekend. And up next, it's Martin.
Oh, I'm covering for Jubes.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello and welcome to the latest Met Office weather forecast for GB News. Heavy showers dominating the country's weather over the next few days. Gusty winds, some sunny spells in between the downpours. They'll be in short supply because low pressure is firmly positioned to the west of Scotland. It's going to become slow moving over the next few days, and it's going to continue to drive heavy downpours in from the southwest with a gusty wind as well. That's going to be particularly noticeable for the southwest of England and northern Scotland. Northern Scotland subject to more persistent rain overnight, tending to ease later on. Another band of more persistent rain moves into Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest, with some clearer and drier spells further east across England and central and southern Scotland. However, temperatures are not falling as far as previous nights because we've lost that cold Arctic wind.